position. So first and foremost, welcome everyone right now. As I said, I'm hoping that they are going to ping something sooner than later. It's all a major plot. That they'll be picking something sooner than later for people to come and check, for them to just give an update as far as us having the show going on right now. So again, we're going to go for about, I don't know, and it could be anywhere from 1 to 3 hours, right? We kind of have a 1 hour minimum on everything. And in today's session, what we're going to talk about is going to be pretty much a simple breakdown. For anyone that read the announcement post that they had on the IK server, we're going to be talking about kind of what is Infinity Kingdom. We're also going to be talking about kingdom builders in general that Infinity Kingdom falls under. And then we're going to be talking about things, for example, like when you're starting out, right? What's the genre? What kind of makes it special? We'll be talking about everything that you can do inside and outside of the game so you can really get a good hyper focus and then a broad focus on what kingdom builders allow you to do as a gamer and everything they really offer. We'll talk about kind of what the objective is when you play kingdom builders, and specifically IK when you're going into a server. We'll talk about trends, things that you will come across in different servers. We'll give you some examples of those as well. We will then also talk about different ways that you can play and different experiences that you most likely will have or have already had that kind of have led you to this point. And then the last two areas we're going to talk about is we'll talk about kind of realistic expectations that you should have when you're playing Kingdom Builders. And again, kind of goes hand in hand with things that you can experience when you are playing in a server. And then we'll also talk about jumping. So if anyone's curious on that, we're kind of going to save that for last. But if you're curious on jumping, I'll kind of give a broad perspective on what is jumping, how you can jump, how you can kind of take advantage of an Infinity Kingdom based on what the current mechanic capabilities are in-game. And then at the very end, we'll kind of have an open floor. So we'll do an open floor Q&A. That's kind of where you'll be able to use your hand, the hand raise feature, in addition to possibly doing it at the end of the sections that I'll start talking about, or better yet, the requests, if you will. And we'll do some cool things with that, too. So I'm pretty excited for what we're going to have happening today. Now, the one thing I would just love to get a starter on is how many of you have played Kingdom Builders before? And you can just use the hand feature here in the stage. If you've played a Kingdom Builder before, even if it's before Infinity Kingdom, how many of you have? And you could just use the little hand feature on the stage. I'm just curious to get a gauge on how many potential new or first-time Kingdom Builder players we have versus people that have some experience. Okay, so about almost half of the group. Awesome. Okay, sweet. In that case, man, I wish I could do like a mass dismiss. I just have to click everyone's thing. Cool. Awesome. So, okay, so we definitely have a good amount of people that have played, maybe about half the other group, a little bit newer, if not first time. So, let me start off with Infinity Kingdom itself, and some of what I really like as... let me actually start broader than that. So, a Kingdom Builder game is, and even though I want to limit how many kind of references I give, basically when you're playing, it is a kind of MMO RTS, right, interactive game of strategy, more or less, where when you load in, you are essentially, it's almost like if you played The Sims, is sometimes a good example, right? Something like a Civilization, but just a more expanded view of that. And you're loading into a server, and in Infinity Kingdom, the entire map is open, so you can essentially go wherever you want, from one end to the other end, even if you slow relocate, right? It might take you 4 or 5 hours, but you'll get there and you'll make it. And so when you're starting, right, you're essentially building your city up. You are, you're training troops, you're gathering resources, you're joining an alliance, you're trying to go and capture a city, and then from there, you are working with, right, and doing things like diplomacy with other alliances. So it's really interesting because it's one of those games where you're really building a server / kingdom, and even more so a community with players that are enjoying every single part of the game that you're basically building together. And the awesome thing about that is, it's all PvP at the end of the day, right? There's no bots, so to speak, that you're really going to ever come across in a kingdom builder game, which is fantastic. So you know that when you load into a new server, right, you're going to have 30, 40,000 people that are all going to get loaded into that server, right, prior to them more or less coming out with the next server. Which is really awesome when you think about it like that, because I've played a lot of other games where usually, it's like a 50 to 70, 80% ratio of bot fill to PvP, and as more players come in, that's kind of when they lower the ratio down. So that's something that I really enjoy about the Kingdom Builder space, and specifically, again, Infinity Kingdom, because when you go into a server, you are literally playing with all these other players, and you're trying to navigate and kind of figure out how you are going to work with, or not, depending on your playstyle. But again, I think some of the things that makes Infinity Kingdom and just the Kingdom Builder genre fantastic in its own right is the ability that you're able to kind of create this community of players. And again, everyone is an actual, PvP person, right? It's not the environment as in PvE or bots that are filled. So I think those are some of the great things about just the space in general, is you're just working with people, which is really awesome, and that's not something I really get in other games. Now let me talk about some of the things that I think are standouts, right? Some things that make Infinity Kingdom different in that regard. So you're going to have, and again, I'll just kind of start out with some of the basic things. Let me see here. Okay. Awesome. Sorry, I just had to send one last message. All right. So now some of the things that I think are standouts, right? That I think really makes Infinity Kingdom a extremely unique game in its own right. And these are things that I can tell you from my experience, and I'll give you guys a little background too as well, right? I mean, I've been gaming for a while, but as far as mobile gaming specifically, I've been doing that probably for the past, I want to say 5 years or so. I recently got into Kingdom Builders probably about 4 years ago. If for some of you guys that watch my videos on YouTube, you'll probably hear me reference it a lot as far as ones that I have played a lot previously. But I really think Infinity Kingdom, at least in my opinion so far, for how long I've been playing the game, does stand out a lot in the Kingdom Builder space. I think a few of the big things that I really like about the game is, one, I think the fact that you can have up to 3 building queues is extremely important. Right now, of course, yes, it is somewhat paywall gated because you have to spend $5 to do it, but it is such a big win, right? And for the most part, right, you can go do some chores around the house, maybe get $5 depending if you're, still at home with the fam, or if you're on your own, and you're working, I think $5 is somewhat reasonable. But it is, regardless of the example or situation anyone's in, I still think that is a standout feature. I know in other games, sometimes I'm only able to do 2, so I think this is awesome that you're able to do 3. I think that's one of the biggest selling points for when I came into the game. I think another great thing about what IK offers is that, from what I've seen, even in the large-scale battles, there's really not a lot of lag, which is amazing if you think about kind of where you're going endgame. And I think from that, it makes it so, right, because I know some people might reference some features I know that have been posted about where they talk about kind of open field combat, where you can kind of move your troop around on the map. And I think just to briefly touch on this, right, the one side of it is that, yes, that's a fantastic feature, but the downside of it for anyone that has played games where they have that kind of an open field feature in it is that there's a lot of lag and there's a lot of delay. And even though the feature sounds great, it really is only applicable in kind of small skirmishes or small battles, and not necessarily with a lot of players in a confined area on the screen at once. And so I think, we've had, as an example, in S36, right, we've had some clashes, even if you look at servers like S9 or S5, right, where they just do a lot of PvP, they do a lot of fighting, and there's other servers outside of that as well. But from what I've noticed, I mean, you could have 100 people fighting at once, and I mean, I have never experienced myself so far, which doesn't mean it may not happen, because again, the game is still developing, but I still haven't experienced any lag. And so I think that is a really solid selling point for the game, when you can have big altercations, especially given that they've announced something like an Alliance versus Alliance, an AVA, and then of course they're going to end up having the server versus server, the SVS, coming out later. So all of these things I think are good signs when you look at when you're starting out, that the game definitely has a lot of potential. So I think that's probably number 2 for me. Number 3 would be, I like the fact that you can utilize the market where it allows for you to purchase shards for your immortals that you can then work to level up their skills. In addition, right, I think first off, that is an amazing selling point, right? Again, for players who have not played a lot of other kingdom builders, you know, you may know this, right? That is beyond. Like, if there was only one thing I needed in the game, like, that would be the one thing. If I just had to pick out one thing that I really like above all else, right, it's the ability to farm immortal shards to skill up your immortals. This is something that, at least for the games I've played before, hasn't really been there. So that's a big selling point to me. I think the fact that they've allowed for you to customize, right? If you look at something like Tower of Knowledge and how that interacts with additional or secondary third and fourth skills that you can eventually add on to your immortals, I think that is another amazing selling point. Something that, again, in other kingdom builders I've played, is not something that's there. So for me, that is above and beyond, I think, an amazing selling point for players coming in, because it allows you more customization options. It allows for you to mix and match. It allows for you to do a little bit more theory crafting. You can do counter skill building when you're doing PvP. You can focus on skill building for attacking that are a little more focused on attacking cities. You can do specific skill builds for matchups if you're going against a specific element type, or if you're trying to build counter skills for the skills that your opponent is building, if it's something like Arena, which we might touch on later. But again, just the ability to work on different compositions and the synergies of those compositions along with the support skills that you have access to, I think is just another fantastic selling point in the game. The next thing I would say that I really like about Infinity Kingdom, and then we'll kind of get to more of like what you can do outside of the game. And again, for everyone that's joining, really awesome. We're already at like 50 people so far. We're definitely going to be opening up some of the hand raise requests, and that's just an ability if you want to be able to talk or ask a question. Otherwise, again, I'll kind of be periodically working on the voice channel chat, which they did just open up for anyone that wants to kind of discuss what we're talking about, or if you'd like to ask a question in there as well. Just in the event that you might not be able to voice it, you're more than welcome to use that as well, which is just the channel directly above this stage channel. But we'll definitely be calling on questions here in a bit, and then when I do, you guys can use the hand raise or the request feature for that. And so I would say, you know, the next thing that I really like about IK, I think overall, is the fact that there are a lot of different immortal matchups, you know, where you have to really kind of pick and choose. I know it's pretty straightforward right now for the most part for anyone who's been playing for a while, because the game really incentivizes you in, I would say, a good amount of ways where you are more favored to have kind of full 5-0 comps instead of doing like a 4-1 flex or a 3-2 flex, or if you wanted to kind of do, you know, a taste the rainbow, get all your flavors and just kind of do a, you know, like a pure buffet type lineup where you kind of have one of each, including your dragon. And that's mainly just because of the bonuses that you get. Now, I think some people might choose to do something like a 4-1 flex a little more often than really extending it past, because you're really only losing the 10% buff that you get from going 5. But again, right, the game still incentivizes you. I think a lot of people, even a lot of players, still don't know that, you know, HP is based off skill damage, right? So the more HP you have on your troops and just in your lineup overall, right, the higher damage you're going to be doing for your immortal skills. So, you know, HP, even though it's 10%, you know, that's going to scale once you end up getting your immortals to 30, to 40, right? You get them max gear, max tech, or max skills, right? It's all going to factor into that. Even though more so really for like the level 40, because that is really what's going to be increasing your troop load capacity. So again, those are just some of the things that I really like about Infinity Kingdom, that I at least have came to really enjoy about what I think the game offers. I think that like some of the new features they've been putting in with like the Alliance group chat, I think has been fantastic. the ability to kind of create customized groups. I would love for them to eventually do something like where they add a friend system in, so you can do more kind of private chat rooms. You can add people even if it's players that are not in your server, so you can kind of create these cross group chat rooms. There's a lot of other things that I think the game still has a lot of open space to work with, which I think is fantastic. Yeah, so I think that's probably it for at least some of my standout points. Again, before we kind of move on to the next section, I would love to hear from anyone that is here. If you want to type that into the voice channel chat, if you want to raise your hand at this point, I would love just to hear what are some features about the game that you really enjoy, and that can be whether or not it's you coming from another game and you just liking the differences that Infinity Kingdom offers. And again, if you want to raise your hand, again, and you want to voice your answer or your response, I would love to call on anyone that would like. Otherwise, if you're a little more comfortable, again, just posting it in the voice channel chat, please feel free. But I would love, again, if anyone wants to, I would really love to hear what anyone really enjoys about the game so far, just to get some other perspectives outside of my own. Let me see, Azriel. Okay, Azriel, go ahead. You're on. Or, excuse me, the invite. Oh, that's interesting. So I actually have to send an invite. There we go. We'll give it a sec. I'll refresh. Okay. Let's see here. Get the video of the educational series. Yeah, so it's only audio. So stage channels are only audio, mainly because it allows for more than 99 people to join. But again, I am recording, so it is something, and I'll be trying to kind of show, if the game loads, then I'll be trying to show the kind of in-game screen while I talk about things. That was kind of my plan for things that I talked about. I would kind of show it in-game. But given that the game isn't loading currently, that obviously hampers that a little bit. But anyways, okay, let me go ahead and see if anyone did ask. Reamer said I really like the quality of the game. It runs smooth, has good graphics, has a lot of quality of life from the start. Agreed. No, I'm definitely with you there on that, Reamer, for sure. Oh, let's see, someone did. Razmataz. All right, let's go ahead and invite you. I just sent you a request to speak if you'd like, Raz, to hear your thoughts. Okay, I think give it a second, because I'm pretty sure people have to accept the invitation to speak. Okay, let's dismiss. Let's go with Frey.
Oh, there we go. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Frey, what's up? You are on.
Awesome. One of the things I really liked about it, actually, is I know people are saying it's becoming more pay to win, but having said that, like, the whale on our server is like around 150k trip strength. And then in my own alliance, we have a free to play who's he's close to 100k. And then myself would be a low spender. I'd be top 20 in my kingdom, top 15. So, and by low spender, I mean like I buy the daily deals, right? But I wouldn't be buying out the market like our boy, like our top boy. And I really like that because I played games. I'm after forgetting it, despite how much money I spent on it. It was a space one, and then I played North Mobile a lot, and I found that like unless I drop considerable sums of money on the game, I'd straight up get kicked by my alliance, right? Because I wouldn't be able to keep up with the growth. And I find that Infinity Kingdom, or at least on my server, I've only played on a couple of servers on here, but in all the servers I've played on, that's never really been the case. I've always felt like I can stay competitive if I just put in the work, and I feel like that's something that a lot of games that I have played, because I played a lot of Kingdom Builders, just never really had. So,
yeah. Yeah. No. I can definitely understand that too as well. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I think to Frey's point, right? It is. I think the game, and we'll cover this in later sections too. But just to briefly touch on that, I think I mean, even to the general consensus I hear from a lot of spenders is that the barrier of entry, as far as for what you get, what's your return on your investment, and what do you actually get for the amount that you spend is a lot more in IK than in some other games that they've played. Along with, I think, the fact that when you look at when you look at a game like IK with some of the mechanics it has, I mean, one of the other fantastic mechanics that the game has, just as a feature, is that it does limit how much you can do, right? Especially if you're spending, right? You're somewhat hard capped well, I should say soft capped in some areas where you can only buy a certain amount. Like if you run out of AP, you can only buy so much extra AP after you run out in zero, and that's only after you use all your items, right? And it's kind of like an emergency fund, but you're still limited on how much you can get after that. And there's other areas that you're limited on as well. So I think that even though there is somewhat of a soft cap in the game for spenders, in addition to some of the war and the PvP mechanics that also limit how much a spender can do. As a brief example, I will tell you that in S36, the server I'm currently in, right, we had we had one kind of big whale there, and he was kind of the biggest for a little while, and then we eventually had two players that were kind of slowly catching up, right? You had like one player that was kind of going a little back and forth, but then there was a point where the number one guy, who was kind of a part of the rogue group, and still is, even though it's just a small group at the moment, right? He was maybe about 5 or 6k troop power above the kind of number 2 and number 3 players, but it doesn't mean that you still can't be effective. It doesn't mean you still can't be efficient. There's a lot of ways to make a whale's experience in your server very challenging and very difficult. Like I could tell you right now, the player that was or the big player that is the rogue player right now, he has no troops. Like he's basically been zeroed outside of his hospital, right? And I'm sure some of you guys are like, wow, boss, how is that possible? How are you guys able to kind of keep the reins or to mitigate a lot of the potential damage that whales can do in IK? Again, it's a lot easier than you might think. Again, it really just comes from having a good understanding of what the current PvP capabilities are, along with general mechanics, and we've been doing a great job, I think, in S36 of how we're able to limit the kind of small group that we have there that is just wanting to do nothing but PvP, along with limiting how much the 1 to 2 bigger players are that are in that group as well. And it makes things very challenging. I think the example I'll briefly give just before we move on to the next subject here is that in our server, for anyone who's watched my videos and me kind of cover it every once in a while on our S36 updates, is that they started as 3 alliances that were kind of against the server. Now they're 1. And more specifically, there are only about 25 players, give or take, maybe 25, 30, that are really kind of semi-active. So they've lost a lot of ground. And again, I may talk about a little bit of that later if anyone has a question on that, as far as how you can go about kind of dealing with those situations and any kind of rogue players, especially if they're the top or highest true power players on your server. But let me go ahead and get to the next part of our series, which is going to be point number 2, and that is going to be titled "Everything That You Can Do in Infinity Kingdom outside and inside of the game that affects the game overall." So one of the things we talked about previously is that when you're playing Infinity Kingdom and just in the Kingdom Builder genre, there's so much more that the game offers outside of just logging in and playing. Now, yes, that is the main part, and some people are like, boss, but isn't the whole point of playing Infinity Kingdom to actually log in and play the game? Yes, you are right, good sir or madam, but there is a lot that actually goes into Kingdom Builders that is done not only outside of the game, but also inside of the game that isn't something that's a direct result of you playing the game. As far as clicking on things, upgrading, doing your dailies, just doing the general kind of farm grind. And some of those things essentially are that when you are, and what's so interesting now that I'm thinking about it is I'm logged in on my third BlueStacks interest on my farm account, but I can't log in on my other accounts. Anyways, just a side random tangent. One of the amazing things, or a few of the things that are really awesome about the game, is diplomacy. Now, diplomacy is something that you do in Kingdom Builders. It's a very common category. I mean, in some of my previous groups, right, we have departments of players that are in areas like diplomacy, recruiting, ice and intelligence gathering. We have gosh, what is it? We have like community affairs, which essentially runs things like community events, and others. We have a marketing team that kind of works with recruitment and basically for our in-game players to do things like custom avatar pictures, to do things for our Discord. You have town halls that you might do. You might have social events that you do on your Discord, also for the players that are in your server. So let me just briefly touch on the diplomacy portion. So there's a couple areas of diplomacy that I think are really interesting when it comes to Kingdom Builders, and especially how I think IK is going to play out. Now, when you first load into a new server as a player, right, there's a couple situations that might come up. You might just be a solo player. You might just be a brand new player, and you're just going to load into the newest server that's currently out. You might be a player that is a part of a small group. You might be a player that's a part of an alliance full worth of group, right? You might be a part of a 50-player group coming in. Or you might be a part of a couple alliances, right, and past that. But the interesting thing is that when you're conducting diplomacy, right, early on, a lot of it really just kind of comes from feeling out how the server is going to play, right? You might try to diplo and think that the approach initially is to try and do diplo work with alliances that are within your faction. Mainly that's just because of how the game is set up, right? Where you have 3 different factions, and it's I think the way that they're trying to trend the game in is that whether they want one faction to kind of be the top faction, and that's whether or not the other 2 factions die off or they stay healthy, or kind of any version of that in between. The diplomacy portion is always going to be vitally important, and that's one of the awesome things I think about these types of games is if I go play an FPS game, I'm not doing any diplo because we're just basically shooting each other in real time. If I go play an RTS game, right, like anything else, I'm not going to diplo because we're basically battling it out in real time. Fighting games, sports games, right? You don't think of joining a new server or kingdom like you're basically creating your own country, and you're having to build everything from the ground up, right? Relations, networking, communication, diplomacy, right? You're doing, again, all the other areas that you get. That's what to me is so fascinating about the Kingdom Builder space, is that it really is allowing for you to essentially do that. And I think that's one of the most amazing things about these types of games. But at least touching a little bit more expanded on the diplomacy portion is that, right, you might have to reach out to a friendly alliance and ask them, hey, do you guys want a diplo? Or you might reach out to a bulk of alliances, whether that's within your color faction or even outside of it. And it just depends on kind of what you're reaching out for. Whether you're reaching out for because you just want to form an alliance, you guys might protect each other. Maybe that's the plan. Maybe you guys assist and support or help each other when your alliance is going to cap a city, they support you. When they go to capture a city or siege a city, you support them. Maybe it's a little broader than that. Maybe you're trying to look to carve out a section of the server or a corner of the server in a specific province that's going to be for your alliance or your group of alliances, and you guys just kind of split the city territories. There's a lot of other factors that go into that. Maybe you're trying to go out and diplo with every alliance in the server because you want to see if everyone's going to be on the same page. Right? There's a lot of different ways that servers can play out, and again, we'll touch on that a little bit later. The next thing is like recruiting. Recruiting is a really big thing. And there's a lot of recruiting. Usually the majority of recruitment typically happens, in my experience, it's kind of like 40-60. I think about 40% of the recruitment typically happens outside of the game on places like the official game Discord. Again, you can see that they have recruitment channels for like the server jumpers, the alliance recruitment. So you have a lot of that happens there. Then you're going to have recruitment that's going to happen inside the game. And that can be internal server recruitment, where you're recruiting individual players to come to join your alliances, whether you're doing recruitment to help with things like mergers. So this is something that typically happens kind of more around the mid-game. We'll probably talk about this later in week 3, but these are some things that usually you'll look at when it comes to internal and then external recruitment, which is looking at migration recruitment, right, outside of that. And again, some of these things we'll dive a little bit more into later. And then you're going to have like ICE and intelligence gathering. This is a really big thing, and some people are like, damn, boss, you're like really taking this super seriously. You guys got ICE teams set up. What are you, the FBI? You about to SWAT some people? No. What it really is information control is vitally important. And this is a little bit more of a kind of a more like intermediate, kind of more advanced topic, because it can really dive deep. So I'm just really going to cover it on a very broad base, is that when you're doing ICE work, and you can do this internally and then externally, right? But doing things like stat gathering, again, a very simple example of that could be, let's say you're trying to keep track of your alliance activity. In our alliance in OS on S36, right, we use spreadsheets and we basically track, and actually a good amount of the alliances that we have, some of our leads are in here too as well. They'll use spreadsheets and basically they'll do activity audits every 2 or 3 days. So a simple version of that, and I've talked about this in some of my videos, where you just kind of go down your members list and you'll just write in things like Lord Power. You'll write which is your total power, and then you'll write in things like your tech donations. You might even write in strongest troop power, and you'll do like 2 or 3 of those columns, and then you'll do it again every couple days, and that'll help you track. Because keep in mind, players can log in as often as they want, but it doesn't mean that they're all donating at the same pace, and it doesn't also mean that they're all powering up at the same pace, right? This is essentially to try and weed out people like just inactive players, or maybe, depending on your server, you might have some spies in there, or kind of planter accounts that might just be in there just to delay your overall tech advancement as far as overall donations. And yeah, I'm not going to dive super deep into the whole spy thing, because literally I could make a whole side session about that. But these are things. This is just an example, a brief example, on why you would want to do something like an ICE kind of intelligence gathering. And then you're going to do things, for example, like community ran events. This is something that Kingdom Builders offer, Infinity Kingdom offers, where let's say that there's somewhat of a lull. Like, let's say all your cities have been captured in your server, and sure, you have contention relics that is happening and it's consistently going on, but you're wondering maybe what to do next, right? Or can you add any spice there in the life? Sugar and spice made everything nice. Gosh, I really wanted to make a Powerpuff Girls reference, but I feel like I already missed my opportunity. Sad face. So usually when you're doing like a community ran event, an example of this could be, maybe you're going to set up something in the server where you do alliance for, like, an alliance versus alliance matchup, right? You'll take 20 players from here, 20 players from there, and let's say you guys, go battle it out, and you'll duke it out in like a level 1 district, or you'll duke it out in the Forbidden Zone, and the last person, right, the last player standing, right, who doesn't get ported wins. That's just an example of something. You could do kind of like Where's Waldo games, where you have to find someone's farmer, and if you hit that, right, they'll let you hit their farmer for resources or something, or maybe you'll get a title from the king, right? There's really unique and creative ways that you can still keep healthy activity in a server even after all the cities. You just have to kind of think outside the box, and again, but it is something that you can do inside the game that isn't necessarily really playing the standard timeline of the game that you're going to do for your daily activities. That still affects the game inside and out. And then the last thing I'll briefly touch on is just going to be interacting with players on Discord. I think utilizing social platforms, whether it be creating a Discord server for your kingdom, is vitally important. Not only for having kind of voice calls or doing things like town halls. We do this for S36, where we do weekly town halls. Any and all players are more than welcome to tune in. We have players that are in other servers that come and tune in, even if they're not a part of S36, just to kind of give them a brief rundown of how we do our overviews and kind of how we do our outlines for the areas that we talk about. And so I think doing something like that is really good. It just helps you organize players beyond what the in-game capabilities are. Because a lot of times you will find that having to rely on in-game chats, right? I'm sure some of you have probably noticed in-game chats typically do not save. So usually if it's past 24 hours or something happens and you go back to a chat, it might not be there, or you might not have the text saved from the previous, last post or conversation you had with someone in game. So that's something to consider and think about as well. And then I would say, again, being able to, set up things like officer chats, setting up council chats, right, for leads or R5s and alliances to just be a little bit more coordinated and organized in the conversations that you have is also extremely important to be able to communicate, I think, outside of the game. So that kind of covers, I think, some things. And again, I didn't necessarily touch on everything. I don't want to overload anyone. But those kind of touch on about 6 things or so that are areas that are going to affect the game outside of the game, along with inside of it, but just not kind of following under that typical routine of what you would do in your dailies. Before we move on to the next subject, I'm just gonna open the floor up again for any questions related to what I just talked about. If anyone has a question there specifically on any of the kind of departments that I've mentioned or anything that I just touched on, just specifically, if we can limit it, we'll definitely open the floor up for like a general open wide floor at the end. But if anyone has a question specifically on what I just touched on, and you want to raise your hand if you want to ask a question over voice, or if you want to type it in the voice channel chat, then you're more than welcome to. I'm just going to read through real quick as well. S30 equals pay to win. Wells. Yeah, man, you should have seen S9 and God, I think it was S11 when they were popping off. That was when Legend Roni was here, and he brought over the squad group, and I just heard they had a lot of high level spenders there, and I think that server went pretty low. Oh, Reamer, cool. I didn't know you were a developer. Oh, that's awesome. Cool. That's really good to get a developer's perspective on the fact that when they add in new features, they have almost zero bugs and good quality of life. I definitely would say that's a really good, valuable insight there. Let's see here. And Masita said, one thing I can say better from other Kingdom Builders from a free-to-play perspective is that we get more usage of elements of the game. Example, the Immortals, most of the teams we can get by playing as free-to-play. Yeah, you can. I mean, there's definitely not a lot of hard locks, with the exception of course, the ones that are for the epics. But, you can still build viable teams. And I think, with some of the feedback we've been giving the IK team and the devs about, doing something that I'm sure some of you have probably experienced in other Kingdom Builders, where you have opportunities to unlock and potentially farm or get some immortal or character shards by utilizing like your premium in-game currency. And that would essentially be like your green gems, for example. And so this is something that I think a lot of people have mentioned to them. I've covered it in some of my feedback videos that we do when we take in feedback. We do it about once a month, and I'll just take in a lot of feedback that anyone has, and then we'll organize that into a video. I organize it into like a nice Google Doc outline sheet, and then I'll send it off to the team as well. So, I think when you can really do a good job of organizing your feedback in a very professional, constructive way, I think that's more appealing when you're on the receiving end of it, right? If you're a developer or someone who's like the mediator in between that then communicates that information, it's able to allow them to do their job easier, right? Than, for example, someone just coming in and saying, you need to add this because I think it's the best, otherwise your game is going downhill. Like, that's not really, I think, the type of feedback that most game developers are looking for, right? I think it's trying to be as constructive as you can and as specific and detailed so they can really take some things away from it. Let me see, Kawa said, the game itself is really enjoyable. It has smooth animations, runs very good on my device. I'm definitely looking forward to new and surprising events. Awesome. No, I would say it definitely feels crisp for me. Sorry, I wasn't checking to see if anyone had their hand raised. Okay. No, let me just read through a few more here, and then we'll move on to the next subject. Yeah, okay, okay. No, let me see, a good point there. They are introducing new events or new exclusive events in regular intervals. Yeah, I mean, they've been doing that. Like, if you're talking about like the last hunting festival, I mean, they've been doing stuff like that since Server 4, at least when I started playing. But again, to that point, yes, I do think that's great. I think doing things like that is a great way, even if it's kind of off events that they do that aren't necessarily timed or have any consistency to them, but they just kind of come up and out when they do. I do think it's a great way to kind of keep. I think the fact that they just give a lot of free stuff away. I mean, they added that online reward timer, which I think has been great because it really allows for players to get a lot more rewards overall. And that was something they didn't have in before one of the last updates. I think just with a lot of the free resources and the abilities for free to play to get a lot of rewards really keeps most players very engaged, which is awesome to see. Let's see, I'm just going to read through a little bit more, and then we'll move on to the next subject. You have a whale that's VIP 15. Yeah, man, that Shadow Dragon skin is sick. Sorry, Reamer asked, idea, what if we create some inter-server group to share good findings of community-driven events, sharing experiences of organization of servers? Yeah. So, I've seen stuff like, council, gosh, what is it? I'm trying to think right now. It's called, essentially, it's like a council chat, so to speak, but it's like a server-wide council, right? So you have, whomever like the king or queen is of a server, right? Once they'll take a screenshot, they'll show they are, and then they'll kind of get added to a chat. I've seen some servers running that. There's one person I know that does something like that, which I think is actually a really good creative idea to do. I think it'd be awesome if IK did something like that on the official Discord, where maybe they, brought in, they allowed for like whoever the current king or queen was of a server, or maybe whoever the kind of generally appointed person is of the server, maybe gets added to a kind of council chat on the IK Discord where they can kind of crowdsource information. Outside of that, though, and again, that is something a little bit different, but I do think having a good inner group like that is definitely good. I think that's something that, as an example, you could make the argument we're kind of doing here in a sense. Even though we're doing a series, and even though I have a format that I'm sticking to, right? We are going to be opening the floor up for questions. We'll probably do a feedback thing as well. And those, I think, are opportunities for people to share, their findings and things like that. Again, I can say, I have, I think what I would consider to be a healthy amount of creative ways to keep servers active based on a lot of different servers servers/kingdoms I've played in multiple other games. But keep in mind, right, I think to your point as well, Reamer, that is kind of the opposite side of that, is that for new players who are coming into Kingdom Builders, or if you've, like, let's say you've played other games, but you've only ever played in one server for a long time. This happens all the time, where you have the majority of your player base in a Kingdom Builder typically just plays on one server. They'll play in one server, one kingdom, and they'll usually just stay there, right? There's no, the smaller percentage of players are the ones that'll actually go around and migrate. They'll actually go around and look at other servers to see how they're ran. When I first started playing, this is something I did more or less immediately. So, no, what's up, man? Welcome. This is something that I did pretty early on, right, when I started playing my Kingdom Builders, is I actually proactively made accounts in other servers or other kingdoms. I went and I looked into how are these other kingdoms and servers being managed? How are they being ran? Because when I did that, my world was opened. It was wild to see that, one, not every kingdom or servers ran the same way, and that on the opposite side of that, there are so many different ways that a server and or a kingdom can be managed. And then if you dive deeper than that, even the policies, the ways that it's being managed, so many different things, right, that even factor into all of that. And that's something I think a lot of players, the majority of a game's player base, just don't know, because they either haven't played long enough to see how the way that the server kingdom they've been in, and this is kind of a little bit of a different topic as well, and I don't want to dive too much into this because I could literally make a whole nother series and cover this itself as far as like player psychology and kingdom psychology for trends, because it's really in depth, and I think a lot of people find that somewhat fascinating. Because when I've talked about in some of my videos, I actually had a couple game developers that reached out, and they were like, hey, so I heard you talk about this like psychology thing of trends and how servers are going and things that are basically just going to happen. And they had asked me like, hey, how can we prevent that, or something like that, I think they were, which I just thought was interesting. But anyways, obviously without touching on that too much, let me go ahead and dive into the next topic. So the next topic we're going to talk about is going to be, right, what is the objective of a server, right? So when you load in to a server, when you're playing Kingdom Builders, right, what is, especially specifically, for Infinity Kingdom, right, what is the objective? What is the mission when you're starting out and looking to get to mid-game and then end-game, right? What should your perspective be when you are coming in to this type of a game? So initially, right, as at a very fundamental level, you are leveling up your account, right? You're increasing your immortal levels, you're skilling them up, you're farming resources, you're leveling up your castle, you're doing your dailies, you're trying to take advantage of all the ongoing events that are being played. And then in addition to that, right, the goal of a server can sometimes vary as far as what you may have to kind of transition your long-term approach to. Now, typically when you're starting, and yes, and for anyone who's asked a question, I definitely will call on anyone who has right after I just finished talking about this next topic. So, again, when you're playing, like, what is your purpose as a player? What is your alliance's purposes? And then what's the purpose of the kingdom or the server that you're in? So most of the time, and this is what I like to say is 99% of all servers, and this happens across, from my experience, again, any kingdom builder that you're going to play. But in Infinity Kingdom, right, it still is prevalent. Any server that is made is essentially starting out as a free-for-all. That, in its simplest form, is what the server is, right? You have to assume that when you go into a new server, there is no organization, there's no structure, there is no infrastructure, there's no communication network that has been established or set up at all. And everyone is in that server just playing the game, right? Now, let's think about what would happen if no one communicated with each other or reached out or had any level of conversation in a server. It would most likely turn into players just going and attacking any cities that they want, right? It would probably be players attacking other players that are doing early hiving. This is a very common thing that happens in any new server, where you'll have players that are just early hive around cities, and then you'll have their hives get attacked. It's happened in nearly every server that I have an account in, and have kind of looked around for the ones that I spent a little time in, because I have an account in almost every server. And so, this is just a very simple trend that you'll see happening as far as when it comes to, again, what kind of the purpose is. So, as a player, right, your long-term objective is to try and max your account out, right? I think that's the hope for everyone, right? You want to get to level 40 buildings, you want to get max academy, you want to get max tech, you want to try and eventually at some point invest into VIP, even though for free-to-play it might take 2 years, who knows how long it would to try and get to VIP 15, but these are things that you look at, right? These are your objectives as a player, right? These are your goals, are to try and get to max everything, right? Get a max troop power march, right? Unlock as many immortals as you can. Now, it also goes and factors into the alliance's purpose, because the alliance's purpose and goals might be different from your personal goals. Now, if you're just starting out and playing, you may not necessarily know the difference, because you may not know kind of what you want your personal goals to be when you're starting out in a server. And most of the time, players will just kind of go along with the flow, right? With whatever their alliance is doing, unless they're extremely verbally opposed to it, as far as really, again, if they have other experience or not. Right? Let's say an alliance wants to do nothing but just fight and do PvP. That might appeal to you. Maybe it doesn't, so you might leave and join another alliance. So I think looking at, asking when you go in and you're starting out, ask the alliance, what are your goals? Right? What are you looking to get out of the server? What is your alliance's plan for the server? Right? Are you looking to just fight people? Are you looking to work with people? Because that will also tell you if this server is right for you, to an extent. And then you can also ask, and really you should be doing it more than that, even if you ask other alliances, like, don't be afraid, or be cautious, I should say, about reaching out to other alliances, even if it's within your same faction, and ask them, hey, what are your goals, right, of the server? What are you looking to try and get out of it? Because as a player, now don't get me wrong, if you're just starting out and you're just playing, a lot of the experiences you're going to be having is all going to be firsts, right? Because most players just starting out in Infinity Kingdom more or less just probably won't know the difference as far as what they can expect. So again, my advice is always to try and gather information, right? Reach out to players, reach out to leaders of other alliances, get some more information, and figure out if, and then you can wait maybe a week or two, a couple weeks, and really figure out if this server is going to be the kind of server that you want to play in long term. Because trust me when I say, when you do find a great server to be in, it is a pure enjoyment to be there for a long time. And most of the time, at least early on, you may not figure that out until 1 to 2 to 3 months down the road, where you have an alliance or group of alliances that are kind of establishing themselves as kind of the big dogs in the server, and whether or not they run things or not. And sure, you might even be able to tell that in the first month. But usually once you can kind of figure that out sooner than later, it will help you decide if that server is the right server or ideal server for you. And then next, what I would say, so that kind of covers that. I think a kingdom's purpose, this is the last thing I'll touch on that topic. I think a kingdom's purpose can really be a lot of different things, right? I've seen servers that run a one faction based server. I've seen servers that run a 2 faction based server, and servers that run a 3 faction based server. Those, for the most part, are pretty much the 3 primary ways that you'll probably see servers playing out. And then I think from there, it then just depends on how that faction is. Do you have 1 or 2 alliances that are... Okay, sorry, it wouldn't be anything without my typical midday yawn. So, obviously, wouldn't make the show. But then you have to look at, are the servers or those alliances, right, are they running a kind of a mega alliance style hierarchy? I'm sure for some of you that have played other kingdom builders, you're probably familiar with this terminology. Essentially what it is where, and this is already happening in Infinity Kingdom 2 as well, and it's not that there's really, the challenge is that there's not really a way to stop it, and again, I'm going to touch on this in the next topic, because the next topic we're actually going to talk about is trends. But you kind of have to figure out, right, what you want your kingdom to be. And most of the time, and this is just generally how it goes, if you are not a part of the top alliances or have a large group of top players, it makes it more difficult when it comes to what either your hopes are for the server or kingdom or the direction that the kingdom is going to go in, right? And it's not to say that it's essentially kind of like a Hunger Games, we're just going to battle royale it, so to speak, or a kind of survival of the fittest, but depending on some factors, for example, like how many spenders you potentially have in the server, are the top players basically funneling into 1 or 2 alliances, right? There are some potential hurdles and roadblocks that might come up from that. So again, just things to keep in mind. Now, before we move on to the next topic, does anyone have a question on what I just talked about as far as kind of like player, alliance, or kingdom purposes / objectives? And again, if you want to raise your hand and ask a question on that or type it in the voice channel chat. I think I see one person here that has requested. Let me see, Monkey Berg. Let me go ahead and invite you to... I'll be honest, I almost feel like I'm just hosting a radio show at sometimes. And I should be like, all right, next caller. No, that's too standard. I won't do that. Monkey, let me see here. So I just invited him. I know he asked a little while ago. Okay, no? All right, that's all right. I will cancel that out. But if anyone has a question, and again, you want to voice it for anything I've just talked about, feel free to raise your hand and I can call on you if you want to voice. Otherwise, as always, if you're not able to, you can always, without saying always all the time, even though I just said it again, you can type in the voice channel chat. Let me see here. Where am I at? 10:40? I got to catch up. So, someone pinged me. Okay, here we go. Let me see. Yeah. Okay. No, that's actually a good conversation, Frey, that you and Reem are having. I'll probably touch on that later. Yeah. Let me scroll down to the bottom though, just to see if anyone does have one, or if any hands are raised. Okay, not yet. Let me see if anyone has a question on anything I just touched on. I see a few people typing. I'll just wait to see a few more posts if those do end up being related. If not, then we'll move on to the next fantastic topic, which is a really good one. Monkey was just asking, you said an S27. Okay, awesome. You guys did create a server-wide Discord. Very nice. Very nice. Yeah. My recommendation for people that want to create server-wide Discords, I think it's absolutely fantastic. I cannot tell you. I can't tell you how valuable it is. I mean, we have about 300 people right now. I think it's about 300. It's either that or like 280, 290 that have converted as far as joining from Server 36 into our Discord. But we also verify people. So I think that's also a really important thing. Is you want to make sure that you're verifying people, so you're giving people access to your kingdom section or your server section of your Discord that are actually in your server. But I do think it's very important. I think it just has a lot of value when it comes to organizing your efforts in a multitude of ways. So I think that's fantastic. let me see. Solo Twist asked the kingdom that does, and I'm sorry. Let me see if anyone had a hand raised because I'm always happy to hear more voices. Solo Twist asked the kingdom that does have trouble with spenders, or usually does have one person taking control of the server. Is there really no way to counter that? Okay, so there is. Again, I'll talk about that at the end, mainly just because I just want to stay on topic. So if you're still here by the time I get to the end, otherwise I'll go through the chat and kind of read those off. Just because I am recording, so I will be able to read those at the end. But just so I can attempt to stay on topic, I will answer that question though. But I would just like to try to do that at the end. So if anyone has a question as far as in regards to kind of player alliance or kingdom objectives or perspectives, then I'll definitely answer that first. But I will not forget, and I'm sure someone who will be here till the end will remind me if I don't, because I suffer from STML, which is short-term memory loss. It's not my fault. My lady hates me for it, but I still love her like the peach that she is. Let me see. Sarkawa asked, just joining a new alliance in 3 minutes with 3 friends. Should I try and convince them to get a Discord server? Kawa, so in 3 minutes with 3 friends. What server are you in, Kawa? Or I guess better yet, I should ask, is the server that you're in, do they have a kingdom or a kingdom Discord? Or are you just asking if they don't have Discord and they should download Discord and make an account? If they don't have Discord, yes, 100% I feel they should download it and make an account. If the server you're in does not have a Kingdom Discord, then I would say yes. If you have any form of experience in creating or setting up servers, doing any of the bot coding or inviting, doing any kind of channel management, perms, any of that, yes, I think that is 100% guarantee. You're on server 42. Yeah, I would say, so the first thing I would do is, oh gosh, and I don't even know if I can load in the game yet. Let me see. I don't know if anything's been fixed. Because if I could, let me show you guys some screenshot examples. Let me try to load in real quick. I just want to see if if it does load. So the first thing I would check is to click on every alliance that's on the top of the leaderboards. Sometimes you will find that some of the alliances have Discord servers that they promote in their boards. So as an example, oh well, okay, I think I can log in now. Give me 1 sec. If this loads up, I'm gonna post a screenshot example in the voice channel chat just before we move on to the next subject. Just so I can answer this question for you. I'm just seeing if it's actually loading for me or not. Okay, I think I'm in the clear. I'm just waiting for my blue stack. Okay, fantastic. So I can load back into the game now. Give me 1 moment, and I'm going to show you an example. Thankfully, I have not been attacked yet, which is always nice. So, okay, cool. Let me give you an example here. So this is oh god, I hate when that thing comes up. Let's do it like this. Great. Okay, give me 1 moment. I'm going to post a screenshot here in the in the voice channel chat. So let's see. So here is an example of... is there a way to move? Yes, again, this series is not about recruitment, but if you are interested in going to any server as far as migration, I will just say generally, feel free to contact someone that is there in that server, or that you know is someone there in that server, whether it's a lead or if it's someone who you might know who's a project manager, right? Go out and I would say message that person privately, or message any of the people privately, right? And that's just generally speaking if you're ever looking or interested in migrating to any server, no matter what. So the picture I just posted, if you take a look at the voice channel chat, is an example of that. Like for example, if you look at, sorry, what is it? If you look at the screenshot, right, you can see this is a very simplified template that we use in server 36 for, for our alliances. And you could see top down, right, even if I click on other alliances, declarations, which is the public side of the announcement, right? Keep in mind, when you are creating an alliance and you're looking at your notice board, is your internal alliance announcement board. The declaration board is the public. Panda, what's up? Yeah, Panda's one of our R6s. And so keep in mind that when you're setting up your boards, these are how our boards look consistently. So if you look at any of our top syndicate family alliances in S36, you'll see that there's structure. right? There's organization, there's professionalism. You have the necessary information going top down, and then anytime any new information comes out, we can update those boards. But you can see that one of the main selling points there is that you see the where it says join S36 server Discord, and then we have the link for that. So when you have that information across all of your alliances that you have grouped, it makes getting player conversion to your server a lot easier. In addition to, you can do other means. You can message the top 300 players, which is like the top 100 players in the Troop Power or Lord Power, right? You can send them messages of like, hey, here's our Discord server. Once COR round, Contention of Relics round 1 finishes, you can also get access to King, which is, again, if your alliance wins, has 200 points during the COR event, right? Then you get access to King, permissions, or I should say perms, and then you're able to send server mails out to every player on the server. Now, yes, I do think the server mail does need a little bit of tweaking. I have touched on this as well in another feedback, and I'm just checking to see if anyone has their hand raised. No, not yet. So I think with the server mail, I love that they added it in. I just would love for the improvement there to be more like when you're sending an alliance mail out, right? So there's structure. Because currently, right now, with the server mail, even though it is still extremely useful, and it is a big win because it's going to help you organize, inform, and educate players in the server, because it's all about activity retention at the end of the day, right? It's all about how many players can you retain on your server after once your server closes and then the new server opens. So, and again, this is like an entirely different topic. I don't want to dive too far into it, but if they just updated the server mail to make it look like Alliance mail, and then they expanded it to where you could send like 1,000 to 2,000 characters, in my opinion, I think that would be a win. If they even added, if you wanted to take it a step further and they added it to where you could do some HTML coding, like if you could do colors, bolds, underlines, things like that, even if just a very simple version, that would be the next level. But for me, what my hope is right now is that server mail just updates to where it'll, like when you're looking at, let me see if I can give you an example too from in-game, because, and this is the last thing I'm going to say, and then we'll move on to the next topic, just because I don't want to hamper too long on this, just for the sake of trying to stay aligned with the structure that I have. So if we take a look, I'll send you a screenshot, and I'm going to post this in the channel chat. And let me, hang on, I just have to click on this. Okay. So here's the example I'll give you. So here's a screenshot for King, and yeah, he says I like that. I like that approach. You post your rules there of a court. Yeah. Value. Yeah, I mean, basically, I think what Reamer's done in S16, is very similar to, I think, more or less kind of what any level of organization that you would want to have in a server. Especially when we started out in S6, we did something similar. S8, we did something a little bit more expanded, just because a lot of it comes down to how much involvement you have. You might not have everyone that wants to be on board for doing that. So you might run into roadblocks somewhere, people that just want to do their own thing. And kind of anything in between can happen. But the last thing I'm going to touch on real quick before we move on to the next topic is going to be, if you look at the screenshot I just posted in the voice channel chat, you'll see that this is what the King permissions look like in World Heart. What I would really love is for them just to add something next to migration, or even where it says Kingdom Declaration and just, change it to server mail or King's mail or something like that, right? Where you can then, right, where it, and like I said, they can, even if they keep it the way it is, I think that's fine. It's just I would love for when you click on it, for it to come up like it does when you're sending an alliance mail out. So you can format it, and you can just kind of organize your messages. It can be a little bit longer, so it'll show up like an alliance mail does in that kind of similar format when you're on the receiving end after it's sent. I think that would be the next great step, right? But I think the foundation of the feature is there. So I think that's great. Let me see. Okay, so what's my next time? Let me see if anyone has a hand raised up. Okay, last call. If anyone has a question and you want to raise your hand so we can hear your lovely voices. Otherwise, I will move on to the next topic. Okay. No worries. So let's go to the next one. So the next one, I'm going to dive a little bit more here into trends. So we're going to talk about trends that you'll find in Infinity Kingdom for any server that you're in. And this will be general trends that we're going to talk about. And this is really, from here on out, this is really when we kind of start getting to the bread and butter of the show. And as far as for this week's content coverage. So we're going to talk about things like what are some absolutes, what's the ladder effect. We're going to talk about things like kill event. We'll talk about, what are some things that kind of lead to chaos in a server. And then we might touch a little bit on contentious relics, but I'm going to try and keep it pretty limited to that. So let me start off talking about some of the consistent things that you're going to see happen when you start out in a server. The number one thing is, and this typically happens when there is just no level of structure in it at all. And I will give you an example. I don't even have my third instance loaded up. Let me do that real quick so I can show you a screenshot from a recent server. So what usually happens is that when players are coming in and playing in a new server, the idea is that they're working on increasing their power. They're working on leveling up and progressing. What usually comes with that is, in the beginning, right, they'll probably just join an alliance because it's an open alliance, but then you're going to have certain players that will, or some players I should say, that will, and so with all of that, let me see here. Okay, so with all of that, the idea is that you're going to play a little bit, and then you're probably going to consider either leaving that alliance and trying to join a higher ranked alliance. New players may not necessarily be as privy to this, but it doesn't mean that they may not try to do it. In addition to that, for anyone that has previous experience playing these types of games, you will also know that, or you may know, that usually players that are a part of the top alliances usually have a higher chance of them having spenders. So that is also another area. So you have these few different places that factor into how a new server trends when it comes. Now, every server on default will trend in the direction of going in a mega alliance style structure. And what that means is that it's all about the funneling effect, right? If there's no structure, if there's no organization, your server is going to go in the direction of players more or less funneling, and this is like for top players, and it typically starts there and then kind of trickles down, where they will funnel into higher ranked alliances until they eventually can try and join the highest ranked alliance, per their faction, of course. This is just the way that these types of games, and Infinity Kingdom is not, excluded of that, but that's what's going to happen when you join a new server, is you're going to play, you're going to see which alliances are kind of going to be able to get that early recruitment, because typically when you're just starting in a server, you're really trying to do a lot of that. And as far as, one, gathering up as many players as you can, and then once the dust settles and alliances are kind of at that near max player capacity early on, which could be somewhere like a 49 out of 50, 48 out of 50, if not 50 out of 50, right before they hit their first big family alliance tech upgrade to increase the member capacity, that's what you're going to see. You're probably going to see maybe 1 to 3 alliances kind of branch out, and then at some point in time, you most likely will have one alliance that just starts really stretching the power gap. And then from that point, you're going to have top players will usually reach out to the leads, and some of them, even if they're top players in other faction colors, they may switch and go over to the number one alliance, regardless of what faction they're in. And then you also might get more of that kind of funneling effect from players that are within your current faction. This is just the way that servers trend. And again, it's to no fault of anyone's. It's just kind of the hierarchy of it all, if you will. So that is something just to keep in mind that you can have happen. The Next things that are usually pretty hard absolutes is that you're always going to have players in your server that will attack others for no reason, or better yet, for the reason of just PvPing, again, for what their viewpoint and perspective is on playing. No matter what, these things are always going to happen. Now, the only real limitation is just going to be how many, and how many players and or how many alliances, and then lastly, how often and how aggressive are they. But these are things that are going to happen in every server no matter what. There's really no way to stop it. You can really only limit it. And that typically comes in the form of coming in with an organized group. And again, we'll touch on that a little bit later. The next thing is that when you're starting out, right, one of the big events that is going to happen for you in Infinity Kingdom is going to be your kill event. So kill event is what I like to refer to as a, I don't know if I want to say kind of herding of the sheep to the wolves, but I want to say it is, it's probably the most volatile event, or it can be the most volatile event. And the reason why is because when kill event comes up, it is titled Contention of Lords in, NIK, and usually starts at about 3, God, is it 3 weeks? I want to say it's like around Supreme Alliance. So I think it's about 3 weeks in. I'm probably off on a day or two, plus or minus somewhere. But when it does come up, the challenge is that when if there's no rules at all whatsoever, it is most likely going to be a free for all, which means that with the way the event is set up, you are getting points based off of attacking players' cities or their farmers on RSS tiles. So you can only imagine that if there's no rules or any kind of organization set up, it is purely going to be a Hunger Games moment, right? Where you're going to have players attacking anyone and everyone. Now, yeah, you might have some internal agreements if you've done some Diplo early on. Maybe you have some alliances that you're working with. Maybe your faction is kind of banded together. I mean, sure, there are better situations. Keep in mind, when I say free-for-all, that is like bottom of the barrel. That is essentially where any and every server is already going in the direction of, unless something is done beyond not doing anything, right? So your neglect of setting up a process is what leads to that. And it doesn't mean that that's necessarily, and I'm not trying to say like that is the worst thing ever, but that is where every new server is going to trend in if nothing is done beyond not doing anything. And from that, the challenge is that, like I talk about, when you have a new server that comes out, right, you're going to get 30, 40,000 new players into your server just at minimum. And you can tell this if you join a new server and you look at, let me see here. You know what, let me pull something up. Sorry, give me one moment. I don't want to have to take this phone call, but for some reason I think it is drastically important. Allow me just a minute or two. I'll be right back. I apologize, guys. Okay, I'm back. Whew. Awesome. Sorry, I had a family member that just called, so I appreciate everyone's understanding. Let me get back on track with the... Gosh, where was I on? I was on Kill Event. So the big thing that I want to touch on with the Kill Event, and I know some people had already asked, and someone does have their hand up, and I'm going to call on people in a moment. So if you have a question in regards to kind of server trends, about that, anything related to server trends and kind of how servers can play out, if you guys want to ask a question or raise your hand, please feel free. I'm going to call on people in a moment, or if you have a question, as always, you can type it in the voice channel chat. So the big thing here is that, as I've mentioned earlier, it is all about server retention, right, at the end of the day. And this is more, and keep in mind, some of the things that I'm talking about, might be a little bit more kind of over some people's heads, because I think most players that are coming in and playing games are not really looking at servers from kind of a management perspective or from any kind of a higher level of organization. I think most players that when they come into the game, right, it is just purely from a playing perspective as far as, how, what can they do to kind of best themselves, right, and get the most out of their accounts as they can when they're playing. And more often than not, what usually happens is that players are a little bit more just concerned kind of with their general progression and not necessarily, I don't want to say the politics of servers, but as far as kind of where servers are going. And, for a server like ours in S36, we love hearing from our players. It's one of the reasons why we do weekly town halls. And we usually get anywhere from 30 to 40 people that show up on a weekly basis. And that number thankfully has been kind of trending upwards as we get more people converted over. And then of course, pending if people can make the times that we do it, as that's always going to play a big factor, is choosing a good time to do it to try and get the most amount of conversion and attendance that you can, similar to kind of how we're doing this show. But those are good processes and I think good things to put in place. So, and then I want to say that the very last thing I'll touch on when it comes to server trends, and I don't want to spend a plethora of time here, but again, keep in mind, no order leads to chaos. And I think that's something that we've seen far too often than not. I think some prime examples I'll give you of some servers I know of. One of my friends, Yore, when I first met him, right, I think he still plays in server 5. And server 5 is just a war zone, right? Like if you just want to PvP and do nothing but PvP, 0 people get zeroed on a daily basis, right? Attack cities all day long. That's the server I would say is a server to potentially go to. I think server 9 has a little bit of that. I think there's some other kind of warring PvP servers that are like that. And I've seen some people migrate there. I've seen more people migrate out than I have migrated in, that at least I've heard of. And I think at the end of the day, that's mainly just because... and this is my general opinion. I just think fighting and doing nonstop PvP within your server, your home server, is somewhat pointless. And that's because of things like what we've talked about before. I think anyone who's played Kingdom Builders, and especially for people that have seen the announcements coming out for IK, is that, Alliance versus Alliance is probably going to be the next big thing that we get. And that's number one. That's going to be awesome, right? You're going to be able to kind of go into your 40 versus 40 player matchups, which is amazing, and I can't wait to do some of that coverage. I would love to do some commentary on that too as well, if they're looking for commentators to host matches, because I'll definitely be doing that for any of our alliances in S36. And then you also have the next big thing, which is Global Arena. This is something that I just think is absolutely amazing. Which is, I think, has a lot of potential for where the game can go. As an example, in other games I've played, they've had similar things like this, where you can kind of do like 1v1 matchups, but it's typically limited to your server or the kingdom that you're in. So the fact that they've came out and said, hey, we're going to open up to do arena, we're going to have a global arena that's separate from your server's arena, I think is awesome, because I think it gives you an opportunity to test things like meta comps. You could do a lot more trial and error with your composition testing, with skill synergies, and I feel like the amount of information you're going to be able to learn to prepare for AVA or SVS is just going to be a bloody gold mine, in my opinion, I think. And so I am so excited to see when that comes out. And then, of course, you have the last big thing, which I think for the most part is the biggest thing that every player should look forward to when it comes to endgame, which is server versus server, right? Or kingdom versus kingdom, as some of you also might know it as. And that's where you're, depending on how IK does it, depending on how they set it up, My opinion of it is I would love to see them just create a new map. I would love to see them create a specific map for SVS and them have anywhere from 4 to 8 servers on the map. And then do something where maybe at different stages or different points, maybe certain parts of the map open up, or maybe you have your staging area for like a few days and then the entire map just opens up, right? And they'll have objectives in it. The rewards will be awesome. Typically for SVS, usually the rewards are always the best out of typically any event. But the ability for you to take players from your server and go fight in PvP against players from another server, that is endgame. That is where the most fun, in my opinion, out of a Kingdom Builder game like Infinity Kingdom comes from. It's not from you PvPing with people on your server. This is why, and this gets into a little bit of the psychology, and I'm just going to touch on this one point because I don't want to dive too far into it, because if I do, I'm going to go down the rabbit hole really far here, is that this is why I always find it so utterly pointless when, and that's me putting it nicely, is when I see servers doing things like Civil Wars, right? Or when I see rogue players or rogue alliances fighting. Because if you really want to make a name for yourself, if you really want to get the absolute most out of PvP, you would be doing everything humanly possible to, and really listen to me here, because this is, like, if you take one thing away from at least today's series, I would say you should take this away, is that your enjoyment, once these features come out, is only going to be amplified once you have the highest level of an account progressed as you can, right? That's what you're doing, right? So when people come out and they talk about things like, oh, this server is just Farmville, or, you know, there's no action in this server, those players, in my opinion, either have not played Kingdom Builders that specifically have these types of features in their games at all, so they just are kind of oblivious to it because they just don't know what they don't know, or they are familiar with it, but they maybe just don't care, so to speak, and they just want to do PvP anyways, right? Because if it was me, and I had, in this example, if I had money to kind of throw, dude, I would really look at progressing my account to get to the highest point that I can get it to, because I want to be as prepared as I can for when SVS comes out. Because at the end of the day, right, you're trying to get as many players as you can to T4, to T5. You want to help players progress their accounts as much as they can. Now that doesn't mean that that any level of PvP or fighting in a server is all bad. Some of it can be good. The example that we kind of have in Server 36, I think, is actually the ideal example of what you get, where you have, you know, a small group of players, you know, or maybe one alliance's worth of players that are PvPing and fighting. Because it allows for how our server is set up, where we have the majority of alliances that are already banded together. We have 30 of our top, I think 30, 35 of our top 50 alliances. We have leaders in our Discord server. And in our S36 leads chat, we have officers from those alliances in there. There's a lot of coordination, right? We have server mail, we have kind of alliance mail channels that are set up for our library. So if we need everyone to kind of send out a mail about something, right, we post that there and everyone sends it out, right? There's a lot of organization and coordination that we have in our infrastructure that we've set up. In addition, pretty much the entire server has already banded together against this one alliance, which, again, they don't really have any cities, they haven't really placed well in any events, right? We're limiting what they can do in a lot of ways because we're organized. And I think, even though, like, the great thing about it is that it also gives all of the players in the server a chance to just do nonstop PvP against these players, right? So it also allows for our group to advance their honor points, which advances their nobility ranking, so they get access to higher level, higher passive tier bonuses for their individual accounts. So there is some greatness and some advantage, or benefits, I should say, that come out of that. But if your server is just non-stop, like you have multiple alliances that are fighting, all your top players are fighting, and you're kind of in this state of somewhat of a civil war, similar to like the S5/S9 examples I gave earlier, that is when I say it can really be damaging. Because let's say all you do is fight non-stop, those resources that you're using to fight are not being used to actually progress your account, right? Keep in mind, you don't get books, you don't get XP books from attacking another player. You don't get gear or equipment from attacking other players. Right? You also don't get experience from attacking other players. right? Those are three vitally important things that you need in order to level up and progress your marches, right? So that's why I say it's kind of like a time and place. You have to kind of mitigate it a little bit in somewhat of a controlled and organized way to really be able to take pure advantage of it, in my opinion. And there has to be a little... Excuse me, as I just cough out my second lung. So, again, I just wanted to touch on that briefly. Now that we've finished number 4, which is, topic number 4, we got 3 more topics after this, and we're going to open the floor up for any kind of general questions. But if anyone has a question on anything I just talked about when it comes to server trends, the ladder effect, hierarchies kill event, no order kind of leads to chaos bits, and you have a question or you want to ask a question or even give a comment if it's something you've experienced or are currently experiencing in your server, and you want to voice that, I'm always happy to hear more voices. You're more than welcome to use that request feature, and I can call on you. Otherwise, I will also go off of anyone who comments or asks a question in the voice channel chat. Oh, there's a bunch of new messages. I haven't even looked here. Let's see. Yeah, Hadama's a hacker. That's for sure. Let's see. Kawa asks, is there more coming to the harbor? Matador Sala. Cancel it. Okay, yeah. And guys, I'm definitely going to go back through the chat and answer any questions that have been asked if they're not specifically related to a current topic that we're on. So thankfully I could scroll back up. Reamer asked, you have RSS and honor from attacking. Yeah, the RSS and honor from attacking is good, but it limits. The thing you have to consider is it's not about the individual player; it's about every player in your server, right? Because because the end goal in a server is always going to be SVS, and then it's really more like AVA, and then probably going to be that global arena that you play as well. Because SVS is the end game, it's all about raising the minimum standard, the bar, right, for every player, and that's your free-to-play base. That's the perspective everyone has to come and approach the game in. So I think the idea there is that when you are looking at how you are going to, when you're looking at how you're going to best prepare your server for SVS, it's really about how are you going to not only educate, but you have to outreach, right? It's all about information, not information control, but it's about information dispersion. So how are you going to educate the majority of your players in your server in the easiest, quickest, and most efficient way possible? And then from there, how are you going to give them good information so you can help them progress their accounts as much as possible? Now, yes, for players that are spending money, that's a little bit different, right? If you're spending money, it probably is a little bit more valuable for you as a spender to focus more on farming honor because you have an ability to do it earlier than a free-to-play player would. For a free-to-play player, there's really no benefit in going out and farming honor early from your main account. If your farm account or your alt account is attacking your main account, yeah, you can do that once your alt or your farm hits T3 at level 20. But if you're looking at when your main account or your primary account should be going out and doing PvP, in my opinion, you should wait till you hit level 30 because you'll unlock T4 at that point. And if you're looking at how to value out your AP usage versus how much honor you're going to get per hit, the amount of honor you get per hit is largely based on the players that the enemy march that you're attacking. So the higher march that you attack, the more honor you're going to get per AP used per attack. And if the majority of your free-to-play base is already at T4, you're going to get more honor per that 103 action points than you would if you did it a week into the server. Meaning that you're going to spend less overall AP to get more honor and hit those higher nobility tiers, right? So it's all about endgame, right? It's really, at least in this regard, it really is. And the challenge is that most players do not think of it like that. Part of it is just because they don't know, right? A lot of players don't usually get involved in kind of kingdom management, politics, things like that. And then on top of that, not everyone has, in my opinion, I think, a good overall understanding of how to really go about managing a server. Like when I come in, and again, I'll just give you an example, right? When I came in as a project manager, and Hadama is someone that's actually been with me for a really long time, Even in other games I've played, he's been a part of a jumper group or other groups that I've managed before. So he's pretty familiar with my system that we usually implement. But a lot of what it comes down to is, I mean, sometimes you really have to like Bobby Fischer it out, right? Or you got to like Magnus Carlsen it out. Like you have to really think 20 to 30 to 40 moves ahead. As far as how you're going to plan things out and really kind of what your big picture is. Because a lot of the things you do from day one when you get into a server is going to have either ramifications that are unforeseen or that may come up, or you're really just going to set your server up for success. And so I think with that in mind, I think you are right, Reamer, in the sense of when you have RSS and Honor, but that's really more for the spenders, not for your free-to-play base, which is your majority base that you should always be appealing to initially when you're coming up with things, because those are the players that are really going to fill out the majority of your activity. Cobble, what's up? Oh, you said you joined an alliance. They are wild and they are all wild and right freely. Fantastic. I love it. Sorry, Rosalie said, in Server 26 we had a dominant alliance just pounding on other faction alliances to switch to that faction. Is there any indicators that factions will not play a part in future SVS? So Rosalie, good question. The short answer right now is no. Again, all we've been told so far when it comes to SVS is that it's being developed and it's being worked on. Now, that also means that could come, that could come in a month, that could come in 3 months, it could come 6 months right down the road. And again, we don't know what's going to happen. Now, my I don't want to say assumption, but my hope for it is that they don't limit the factions. Now, if they want to create maybe some incentive rewards for having more overall faction unity, then okay, that's cool. I'm sure there might be some rewards maybe for like one faction or a specific type of faction in some kind of a regard like that. But I think for the most part at this point, I think it would really benefit them to not necessarily limit by creating faction-based rewards for when SVS comes out. I really think it would be awesome if there was a way to include all the factions into the SVS prep and the way that the mechanics for that game mode are going to play out. And again, that's just my opinion. That doesn't mean that there can't be secondary or tertiary reward tiers, right, for things like that, where it's focused, or maybe you have additional rewards that are focused on like one alliance's, like one faction's objective, or different factions' objective. Like you have certain objectives that are like for each different faction, right, to try and add a little bit of uniqueness to it. I think that could be a cool thing. But I really think that at the moment, right, with the fact that you have, in most servers, you usually have good activity from all the factions. But how much activity you have, and then how much, at least when they're starting out, I should say, is probably the better approach there. Again, we just don't know what they're doing. So, I think our approach in S8, like we have it now in S36, is we want to include all the factions. Because if they end up announcing that SVS is going to trend in a certain direction, by having good activity and health in all the factions, we can downgrade or downsize and condense more easily than you can increase activity, right? You can condense activity extremely easily and efficiently, even if it takes a little bit of time. But if you're already in a server where you've lost out on one faction, and you're in a two-faction or a one-faction-based server, it's going to be difficult for you to expand and build out other factions, because then you're going to have to solely rely on migration recruitment. And if you don't have developed shells, that is also going to impact you. And the developed shell port is probably a conversation for another time. What do I have? Before I get into the next topic, I'm sorry, I think Reamer asked something here. Reamer asked, what is the best server organization faction-wise? One leading faction color. Oh, I was going to say, I wanted to read it first just to follow suit. I know I kind of did talk about it. But just for the fans, or for the audience. He asked, what is the best server organization faction-wise? One leading faction, 2, 3, why? Given COR rewards seem like it is more wise to go all guys to one color, at least at current moment, or am I missing something? So the second part I'll briefly touch on, because I do want I do want to finish covering the last few topics as well, but I know the first part I more or less kind of touched on. The second part, when it comes to contention of relics, so let me give a little bit of context here. So for those who haven't experienced contention of relics yet, or if you're not familiar with the event, gold is essentially the most finite resource in the game. And it usually is the one resource that everyone is trying to harvest or mine as much as they can. Contention of Relics is the single best event for gold gathering, and that is because the faction that wins Contention of Relics after the 3-day participation stage will be able to gather from the special tiles in the Forbidden Zone / middle of the map that spawn there. Now, any player on your server can gather from those tiles. In our servers, we usually set it up where only the winning faction can gather those tiles, and we just do a standard faction rotation. That's how we do it in our server. That's just because we have 3 active factions. The reason why it's important to make it so the winning faction can be the only ones who gather is because the winning faction's players are the only ones who can gather the extra resources from those special tiles. Meaning that they're the ones who can gather the speed ups, the gems, and most importantly, the gold. Right, in addition to the standard resources that spawn. Now, the special tiles are usually like level 8, 9, and 10 tiles, ideally, right? They have higher gathering rates and just a lot of other resources. So if you're not a part of the winning faction, you're only gathering the resources, which means you're taking away all the extra resources from those tiles from players of the winning faction. That's usually why it's set up that way. As far, again, it really just depends. I mean, you can look at it a few ways. If you have one faction in a server and everyone's in that faction, I would say that there's a lot more ramifications to doing it that way than if you have 3 healthy factions that are all active. Because if you have one faction that's active, your server has probably lost a lot of activity to get to that point. And that's whether or not they've left or stopped playing because you've gone to a one faction system, or activity has died and dwindled down over time because you're in a one faction system server. But it also doesn't mean that you've lost all activity. It just means that you've had to do a lot because you've lost a lot because you've had to condense to that, or you've just gone with that system from the beginning. So by having a one faction based server, you're also condensing all the active players into that faction, which mean that you are also going to be vying for however many tiles spawn, right? You're also going to be more dependent you're going to be limited on how many tiles can potentially spawn. This is the other really big thing. When you have 3 healthy factions that are all participating in Contention of Relics, with the latest update on Contention of Relics, the amount of special tiles that spawn are based on overall activity in your server. So you can make the argument that it's actually better to have all 3 factions be healthy and actively participating, because that will increase the amount of overall special tiles that can spawn in the middle of the map. Therefore, giving you more access to more gold that you can then gather from that. So I think that's why we've done it the way we did it, because every faction gets a turn. And when every faction gets a turn, they feel like, okay, it's our turn to gather as much gold as we possibly can. I feel like that is more incentivized for not only retaining activity, but getting more players involved every time their turn comes around. Because it's an overall contributing effort, right? Even if it's not your faction's turn to win the event, there are still incentives for you to participate with, like the new contract system they put in place that is going to get you rewards. Also, the reason why it's also good to keep participating in Contention of Relics, even if it is not your faction's turn to win the event, this is if you're doing a faction rotation system, is because when it's your turn to win the event, you get access to the first place rewards from that event. Meaning, and also because your Valor points carry over. So all the points that you get during every Contention of Relics are saved, meaning that you basically just hold all your points until it's your faction's turn to win, and then you get access to the first place reward. So then you're able to just splurge and buy everything. So the implications, and excuse me, I'm very passionate about these things when I talk about them sometimes, but there's a lot of like long-term implications about being patient and playing the long game, right? And these are things that, again, if you don't have any form of structure set up initially, these are just more things you're going to lose out on, right? In addition to previous things I've talked about. So anyways, let me move on to the next topic, which the next topic is going to be, we're going to talk about different ways to play and experiences. And I have touched on this a little bit, so I'm going to try and simplify and condense this portion so we can get to the next two and then open the floor up completely. So the next one here is, again, different ways to play and the different experiences that you might encounter. So you're going to have, for example, like we've talked about. All right, I've kind of broken these up into how you can come into a server. And it could be coming in as like a free-for-all perspective, kind of a light perspective, where you might have, as we've touched on, kind of one alliance full of players. You might have a medium way that the server is coming into, as far as the challengers, if you will, right, or groups, where you might have 2 to 3 alliances that come into a server. And then you can kind of have that heavy or hard level, where you might have 5 alliances or more that maybe come into a server as an organized group. Or you'll have multiple groups come into servers. I'm sure for players that have played other games, other kingdom builders, and you've ever been a part of kind of jumping groups, you know how fun it is. And I say that with an extreme level of sarcasm, because there's just a big asterisk there on when you have multiple big groups that are jumping to the same server. It's fun because there's a lot of activity, but usually there's always kind of going to be a ruling body in the end, and more often than not, it typically ends in fighting to see who's going to, kind of be the majority group. But it's important to know these things, like we've touched on in I would say multiple areas previously, because when you are joining a server and recognizing that there are multiple ways to play, you can then, again, some players, after they've played in a starting server or their starting server and they've learned a lot, they've played the account for a bit, they may choose to go and try and join a jumping group that's maybe going to jump to a new server. They might try and just keep joining. Like I know some players that they just keep making new accounts, and they'll play in a server for up to 3 days, 3 or 4 days, and they'll just see how the servers pan out. They'll just see how the servers look, how they're shaping for the first couple days. And when they finally find a server that looks like it's one they want to invest a little bit of time in, then they'll play that server for a little bit longer, right? They might give it 3 or 4 more days, right, until the next new server opens up. So just, I guess the point of this subject here is just keep in mind you have options. Don't feel as though you are limited from the first server you start out in, that is going to be your end-all be-all server for the rest of your life, that you're going to be playing Infinity Kingdom, right? Remember that it's good to branch out and look at what else is out there, and that usually should hopefully start in your home, in the server you're in first. Try and get some information, but most of the time when you're just starting out, especially if you're a new player, you're just going to be playing the game and trying to learn as much as you can. And then from the next part, as I said, be comfortable trying out new servers. Be comfortable trying to go out and just get a new experience. Or even if you just go and peek in to a new server, which you can do from your home server. And that kind of, I think, more or less kind of covers that topic. And even though it's a short topic, I still feel it has a lot of extreme importance, because as we've talked about earlier, most players, whether you're a veteran or a new player to Infinity Kingdom or Kingdom Builders in general, more often than not, you are usually playing in the first kingdom you start out in, or the one that maybe you join, with a group of some sort. The challenge here is that, and I shouldn't say challenge, but the potential hindrance is it just limits your perspective on what you can get out of not only IK, but how other kingdoms are ran, how they're managed, right? So that way you don't hopefully kind of get locked into this tunnel vision mindset of, this is how my server plays, this must be how every server plays. And that happens a lot. I can't tell you how many times I've come across where I've spoken to players that have played in other servers, and they tell me, well, our server runs this event the best way, or our server has the best way for keeping activity active, right? And this is the only way to do it. We've tested everything. And so even for myself, I try to always approach things with an open mind. And I think that's one of the reasons why I make accounts at every server, because I like to try and see how servers are organizing themselves, how are they starting out, what are the server mails that they're sending, because I think, again, it's always good to get good ideas. As a prime example, I will give you this before I move on to the next topic. When they announced the new 1.3 update that is currently being tested on the Pioneer server, I immediately made an account on the Pioneer server, and I'm still working on leveling it up. It's almost at level 15, or Castle 15, so I'll be able to cover everything in future updates, and I won't be limited like for Mysterium. But the one thing I found when I had joined an alliance there, and God, I'm forgetting the gal's name too. I want to give her a shout out for the alliance that I joined in the Pioneer server. But when I was looking at how they had their alliance group chats set up, I noticed that they had two group chats. One was for like PvP type tactics, and then one was for gift codes. And I thought that was just a great idea, right? Because you get ideas on how other alliances set up their alliance group chats, like the video I had made where I talked about it, just giving some starter ideas. And you never know. You never know what you're going to see or what you're going to hear. And who would have thought that there would be any kind of an organized alliance on the Pioneer server, right? Which is just the test server, for Pete's sake. And even myself, I was able to see something that I liked, and I thought it was a fantastic idea. And now I'm able to implement that into my alliance, right? So I think that's why kind of crowdsourcing, not only within your kingdom, can be great, but also being willing to go and see what else is out there. So I think that covers that topic. I don't know if anyone had a question on that. If you did, I'll wait a minute or two just for any hand raises, or if anyone wants to ask a question in the voice channel chat, I'll wait a sec, and then we're going to move on to the second to last topic, which will probably go quick, and then we'll get into the jumping process. So Razmataz asked how to join your server. So yeah, if anyone has questions on, like I say, if anyone is curious on how to join servers, my recommendation would be to reach out to someone who's in that server if you're interested in joining or migrating to that server, and then that person can give you more information. Now, whether you can find those people on Discord, or if you just go into the server in-game and you message an alliance lead to ask them about possibly migrating, right? Those are two easy ways that you can do that to get information. But yeah, that's my recommendation. Just try to contact those people personally for any servers that you're interested in going to. Reamer said gift codes. You're welcome, Taz. You're welcome. So I said, yeah. Okay, cool. So let me go ahead and get over. No one had a hand raise. That's okay. I still love everyone, even though I'm not being able to hear anyone else's voice. Okay, I'm just going to cry to myself later. So realistic expectations is the next subject that I'm going to talk about. And again, this will be kind of brief because I already have covered a lot of that. And then we're going to talk about the jumping process. And then we'll kind of open the floor up for any general kind of Q&A and general banter, if you will. So with realistic expectations, I think it's really important for players to really have a good perspective going forward as far as when they play in a new server or when they're just starting out. And that can mean a few things. One, if you're looking at, as an example, if you're looking at the alliance leaderboards and you're in an alliance that, let's just say, isn't the number one alliance in your faction, don't worry, it is not the end of days, and the world is not coming to an end. I would say in that same sphere, but the parallel side of it is that if you're in an alliance, and let's say your alliance has 5 or 10 inactive players, those players can be replenished through recruitment internally, through new players coming in. Right? Do not be discouraged. There has been, as always, I hear almost everything, right? Whether it's, our alliance dropped in the rankings, we should leave, let's go find a new higher alliance, to, my alliance doesn't have any spenders, let me go hop and jump over here, to, my alliance is ranked 20th, and, leave, and, there's so many kind of different ways that you might hear things from players on why they would potentially leave an alliance, or maybe they just have too high of expectations, right? Maybe you didn't cap a city fast enough. But let's say that same player who left your alliance because you didn't cap a city fast enough doesn't even have a troop that's strong enough to beat the garrison on the city, right? So what I find more often than not is taking time to educate players and always explain information in at least as much of a professional and organized way as you can is a good way in to really expanding the knowledge and the experience for players so they have a better understanding on what is possible and what is not possible and what they just have to wait a little bit of time to do. And so I think those are really important things when you come in as a player, is to try and ask as many questions, have a good understanding, and I think, like just in anything in life, right, try to not make too many assumptions when you're coming in, because I think more often than not, when players take the time to give you an answer, you may find out, wow, now that I've been given this answer, it makes a lot of sense. Maybe I shouldn't have gone as hard as I did on my alliance leader or officer in chat or in private chat. And I mean, I see it happen all the time. I mean, and I'm sure a lot of you here who have played other kingdom builders or even for how long you've been playing IK for, you've probably seen it happen too. So that's probably my next biggest tip, is try to have realistic expectations, and for anything you don't know, ask. Because it could be as simple as you asking and getting an answer that is exactly what you needed to hear, compared to going out and making an assumption based on your alliance not capping a city within what you think would be the time they can do it in, or even anything else that kind of falls into there. I think having a good understanding of kind of how you can dissect leaderboards and trends in leaderboards. So this is something that I think is somewhat not, I would say, the most imperative, but I think is something that you might have players leave servers for. I've seen this happen where you'll have players that will look at a leaderboard and they'll see that that server is trending in this kind of 1 to 2 mega alliance style structure, and you have 1 or 2 alliances, if not one alliance, that is just kind of running away with the power gap. And that sometimes can be a reason why players would leave a server, or why they might even choose to leave an alliance to try and join a higher ranked, to join a higher ranked alliance, whether it's within their faction or just overall in the server. So these are things to kind of have realistic expectations to. Sometimes you might have to wait a little bit. You might have to be patient, especially if there's efforts that are being made to balance the power gap. An example is kind of what we've done in S36. Right, I made a video on this where, I'm such a big believer in balancing out power, because I think it does so much for your server in an extremely healthy way, and I think it has a direct impact, and probably one of the biggest impacts as far as player retention goes, for keeping players in your server, because they see that. So let me just briefly touch on this. Right, the idea for like server-wide events is that a player, generally speaking, will feel more inclined to participate and contribute to a server-wide event if their alliance has a chance at winning that event. And if they don't have a chance of winning that event, because let's say you're in a kind of mega alliance style structured server, or you just top 1 or 2 alliances are just so far ahead in power, and maybe they just always win events consistently, that can be a turnoff. And because that's a turnoff, what will happen is you will notice that more often than not, with however many players it may be, they may start lowering their activity. They will not overly contribute to an event past what the bare minimums are, just to get the individual rewards from those events. And then over time, they may either become completely inactive or leave or choose to migrate out. So keep in mind, events for your free-to-play base is extremely important, right? If you want to really have good server activity and retention in your server or your kingdom. So when you are looking at things like balancing out the power, that is what a lot of players will look at. A lot of players will look at what the leaderboard positions are. They'll look at how far away is power. And maybe, as again, not necessarily for the new players. For people that have been playing for a little while, this is a little bit more familiar to them. And these are things that they do look at. Now, if your alliances are somewhat balanced in power, and it stays that way for a long time, and you have alliances that can arguably at any point in time win a server-wide event. An example of this would be like alliance development. It would be, what's the, I'm forgetting the name of it right now. It's at the tip of my tongue. What the rebel, it's like the siege. It's not the siege. It's the rally event. Excuse me. So it's the rally event. This is an event where, right, you have to have people like attack gnome bosses, and other events as well that will factor into that. But if you have it to where, let's say you have 8 or 9 alliances that can win an event over anyone else at any point in time, that is amazing. That is the state that you really want to try and get to, because it will make players contribute past just the bare minimum personal rewards, because they will feel like their contributions to this server-wide event for the alliance they're in is meaningful. They will feel like they can win any event over anyone else at any point in time. And that is an extremely big selling point for you keeping activity retention in your server, just in a different way to keep activity. And so again, I just think that's really important when it comes to, like I said, realistic expectations, kind of how you're looking at leaderboards, and how balancing power from what you're looking at leaderboards, depending on how they look, can really impact a server's health and morale overall. I've kind of already touched on short-term and long-term goals with kind of starting out and some of kind of the end-game features that you look forward to as a player. I think reading the map. The last thing I'm going to touch on before we kind of get into the jumping process, and then we'll open the floor up because we're kind of almost at the end here of our series. I think we've been going for like almost 2 hours too. Yeah, we're almost at 2 hours. So the last thing I'm going to touch on is World Chat. I always give a lot of recommendations when it comes to World Chat, which is, like anything, keep in mind that World Chat is a general chat that every single player in your server has access to. And, I always try and steer on the side of caution where I say, try just to limit how much you do, or you potentially, I don't want to say talk, but just, be respectful in World Chat, right? Kind of goes with the whole general thing of like, treat others how you want to be treated, because you're going to see a lot. There's going to be people bypassing the censorship all the time in a World Chat. There's going to be some interesting conversations, and some I'm sure are going to be anywhere from G-related to rated R as far as conversations you're going to see. So my recommendation there is avoid diving into the well, right, of a conversation in World Chat. If you see someone, like if your first inclination is, let me police this person, I would advise against that, because it's probably not going to work out well, and it's probably not going to stop them. Typically what I find is just avoiding and ignoring is usually something that will kind of allow their flame to go out sooner than later. And that's probably the last piece of advice I would have there when it comes to realistic expectations, right, is, whether or not you choose a server because of what you feel the World Chat toxicity level is, you're going to find that in every server no matter what. It's just going to depend on how much of there it is. So I think that's probably it. Let me see here. I don't know if anyone else has a question. Again, I'm going to pause here just for a moment, just to allow for any questions. If anyone has a hand raised, if you want to voice anything, whether it's asking a question, a comment on anything I just touched on kind of the realistic expectation portion of when you're starting out, or if you want to ask a question in the voice channel chat as usual, please feel free. And then the last thing I'm going to touch on is kind of the jumping process. So that's going to be the last big thing that we talk about, is for jumping. And then we'll get to like the open Q&A, which is just going to be for any questions no matter what. So let me see here. Cookie said, this has been great. Server 38 is already on the path to Unity. We'll definitely be spreading this information to my other officers. Oh, fantastic. I appreciate that you have found anything that I've touched on to be useful. And that's awesome that S38 is heading in that direction. Let me see here. Raoul Bub asked, okay, I have something I know. In other game, you get like gold, silver, bronze league for servers to battle. The point you get will depends if you get a league. Do you think something like this will happen? So, I mean, if you're just asking as simple as something like an alliance versus alliance type format, I mean, that is something that's being developed currently, and it's probably going to come out sooner than later as far as outside of like the big three endgame features that we're waiting for to be released. If you're referring to something else, then I guess if you could try to clarify a little bit more so I might have a better understanding as far as what to compare it to. Where's my agua? Okay. Oh, more like SVS. Yeah. So SVS has been announced. So it is being developed right now. That's been officially stated by the devs. We just don't know what the timeline is. So, again, it could be a month, 3 months, 6 months. 12 months down the road, but it is being worked on. And I'm sure for now, probably what they're really trying to get out is just they're probably really trying to. Typically in kingdom builders like this, usually you see something like an alliance versus alliance and AVA more often than not kind of come out first, in my opinion, and then you might have other things that come out kind of before, because again, SVS is the big thing that everyone looks forward to, right? It's kind of like the big end game feature. So I think in the situation with how things are trending, I think we're probably going to see AVA come out first, then it'll be the global arena or the game wide arena, and then it'll probably be SVS. And I think that's probably going to be the order. So, all right, and then the last thing I'm going to touch on, everyone, because again we're at about 2 hours now, which is awesome. I think we peaked at. And again, I want to keep in mind this is really just grassroots, right? I know I was talking to Vita 2 as well. I know they said that they had forgot. They're gonna definitely remember to ping players next week when we do it for everyone that reacts. And I know there's going to be another announcement that they'll probably put out as well. But I think the fact that we didn't get a follow-up ping for people to come and tune in, and we still peaked at about 65, 66. I don't know if anyone saw more than that, but I think 65 or 66 people, right, for just kind of a grassroots thing of people just joining to come and check it out. For anyone that may not have known of what we were doing, I think it's still fantastic numbers. The last thing I'm going to talk about is jumping. So this is probably something that some of you are probably sticking around for to hear about jumping, and I'm just going to briefly touch on it for a little bit. Just so I don't want to dive too far in, but what I will talk about for the jumping portion is I'm going to talk about the benefits of it really, instead of more so the process. Just so I can keep this section a little shorter, and then also if anyone has any questions, people will be more than welcome to ask. So the point of what I really feel jumping brings to servers, and let me start off with like what is jumping first. So jumping is where you create an account in what I would recommend to be an older server that has at least all the chronicles unlocked that you can achieve, and that's mainly so you can get an immediate boost of of green gems, and resources from those being completed. And those can go forward to you, getting Philosopher Stones or boosting VIP, or anything else you feel would be necessary. And basically, you level your account up to castle level 8, you don't go past 8, and then you're just progressing your account as much as you can. Once you get all your buildings to 8, at that point, it really just becomes a grind of doing Well of Time and constantly hitting gnomes and gnome bosses to keep leveling up your dragons and increasing your level for your immortals. Trying to do as many 9 pulls from Hall of Immortals as you can while upping skills for your immortals. Right? These are essentially just going to be some of your daily tasks that you're going to do as a jumper. The point of it, though, is that when you create your jumping account, it is to try and get your primary march to somewhere around like 19-20k, which usually takes, I would say, about 3 weeks, give or take. This is just from the free-to-play perspective. And so that means that you're going to have to play in an older server for, I would say, 3 to 4 weeks, 3 weeks minimum, and then you join a new server once Chronicle 3 completes, right? So keep in mind, you cannot join a new server right away. You have to wait a few days, which is usually about 2.5 to 3 days on average for when most servers are going to be opening up Chronicle 3. Then once Chronicle 3 completes, you can then migrate or use your novice, I think that's the novice space teleport, to then go to that new server. The point of doing this is that if you do it with a large group, similar to how we did in S36, we had about, I want to say about 150 to 200 people that jumped with us. So the benefit of doing this is that it allows for you to go in with a big group, meaning that you will have a controlling interest or a large interest in the server as far as with your presence. This means that if you have any form of structure already in mind, it allows for you to develop that from day 1, or better yet, when you join on more or less day 3. And it allows for you to bring some order to the potential chaos that can happen. It allows for you to already have a big presence, so you can kind of have somewhat of a managing interest or a power interest in the server. It allows for you to kind of band the server together. It gives you opportunities, I should say, to band the server together sooner than later. right? Because you have the largest or the biggest group in the server, and it just awards you a lot of benefits, in my opinion. Now, again, people who do jumping projects, right, you really have to kind of pick and choose. You have to do some research and kind of figure out what the group's goals are in the server, what their plans are for when they land, how are they going to, make efforts to getting everyone on board, and then what some of their kind of short and long-term goals are, and what some of their kingdom or server policies are going to be. Right, these are all going to be things that you would have to kind of want to do a little bit of research. And so my recommendation as always is that if you're interested in jumping, join multiple groups and talk to people that are in their leadership positions. Pay attention to how active their chats are, what's the advice that they're giving players. These are all really important things to pay attention to, because it is going to allow for you to kind of sift through the groups that you find fall more aligned with what you want as a player, and then out of a server as well. And so I think that's kind of the brief part. Now, if anyone has any questions on that, and I imagine I might get some, this will be the last thing we talk about before we then get to the open floor Q&A portion of this week's meeting, or session I should say, where kind of any and all questions are more than welcome. But if anyone has a question on jumping, you're more than welcome to use the show request or the hand request if you want to ask, comment, or provide anything over voice. Otherwise, I'll take a look at the voice channel chat. Yes, Cookie. So everything's being recorded. So I've been recording since we started, along with the mini break I had as well. So yeah, I will be, once this finishes, I will be uploading it to. I'll be uploading it to my YouTube channel, and then I'll be posting it there. And again, I don't know if Vita, if they're gonna, I guess post it for anyone that's reacted. They might, but again, I'll at least upload it. I'll make sure I give it to them if they want to do anything with it. But it will be up on my YouTube channel later today. So, because I think for something this big, it usually takes a couple hours to kind of process and finish before it's up. But I'm gonna post the whole thing as a public video. But again, that'll be later tonight. So for anyone who's missed it. And what I'll do is I'm going to go through the video as well, and I'm going to title card it out. So I'm actually going to have a timeline in this video. Usually for the bigger ones or the more important ones, I usually do, because I typically have more time available to do that. Because it takes a little bit of a while. You have to kind of go through and re-listen to everything and make sure you're kind of titling out the start times for different topics appropriately. But I will have... I will outline at least the 8 or 9 topics that we've touched on, and I'll make sure I do that. Let me see here. Sorry if anyone's asked another question. So at this point, guys, feel free. Guys and gals have to be gender neutral. But if anyone has a question at all, no matter what the question is, doesn't matter if it's related to anything I've talked about or anything at all, you are more than welcome to ask. And as I said, if you want to do the hand raise because you want to voice or ask your question, or if you want to type it out in the voice channel chat, you're more than welcome to. And I'm just going to check back. Awesome. Still a healthy amount of lingerers. I love you all. Okay, let me take a look here at the voice channel chat to see if anyone has asked anything. Luds said balancing power on an old server may be harder when the two ruling alliances are with grievances. Curious, Luds, if you don't mind me asking, are you on S5? If you respond with a quick yes, I will. I would be surprised. You okay? So I had a good guess. Yeah. Because the way you worded that was oddly specific, and that's the only server that I know of amongst the older servers that, and especially the beta servers, that has that situation playing out right now. So yeah. Gotcha. Yeah, no, agreed. Yeah, man. I mean, like I tell people all the time, I think S5, right, if you are... sorry, and Forge, I'm going to answer your question too. Yeah, I think if people want to PvP and they don't mind getting zeroed and doing zeroing, S5 is the play. S5, S9. Gosh, I don't even know how S11 is, but yeah, I think S5 and S9 are definitely the places to be. You know, if you just like, and especially if you spend money and you just want to do nothing but PvP because like that's the enjoyment you get out of it, then yeah. Let me see. Reamer asked about Jumper. Most useful stuff, in my opinion, is Lord Talent from daily XPs. You would have access to higher level RSS tiles sooner than most people in the server. Gives you more RSS sooner. Yes. No. So I think that's another good point. Again, I didn't really touch into like all the benefits of as far as when it comes to what you're really going to look at as an individual player. But yeah, I think having access to higher, because the thing is when you increase your Lord level, right? Once you hit 20, you'll get access to, I think you get access to another march, and then once you hit Lord level 30, you'll get access to your 4th march. So, yeah, I think outside of investing on the development side of your talent tree, from what you get from your dailies, along with getting access to higher RSS tile zones to gather faster, in addition to being able to then eventually gather with a 3rd and maybe 4th march, depending on how long you grind. I mean, I've known some people that were farming their Jumper accounts for like 2 to 3 months. And it was, I mean, they were just bulking them up. You know, so it just depends on your time. I personally don't think you need to do too much of that. I think the 3-week period is probably the minimum. And I think a good window. Because if you wait any longer than that, you just run the risk of losing out on players who just want to jump early because they don't want to wait. They don't want to keep waiting. And 3 weeks is already a lot to ask, I think, of anyone. So Forge asked, what is the best way to fix a dying server? Oh, and I'm so sorry. Let me see if anyone had a hand raised. I got to make sure I'm checking for that. Okay, no one yet? Cool. Let me go back. Best way to fix a dying server. Can I ask what server you're in, or is it S35? You are, okay. Can I ask why you think S35 is dying? Give me 1 sec. Let me see if I have an account in S35. I might. If I do, oh, I do. Awesome. I do have a leveled account in S35. It's the last 3 servers I'm waiting to. A lot of people daily leaving or complaining. Is that in World Chat? Is that in your Kingdom chat? Is that on your Kingdom Discord? What specifically is that? Or in what areas or situations? Because the thing is, you always hear complaints, right? Sometimes a lot of it is right, having to kind of sift and filter through the noise, right? The big thing I talk about a lot is like the megaphone effect, right? This happens a lot in servers on IK for some players, right? Where you'll have people that will just, it's like they're on repeat, right? You'll have a small group of people that are on repeat, they say the same things over and over again, and it gives the impression that it's more people than it actually is. And so I don't usually kind of fall into the megaphone effect line of thinking because I think it's very misleading. So, sorry, you said people complaining. It's become a very one-sided server. We have tried to help other factions, and it ends up full flop when we are back at 0 politics. Let me take a look. So you're one server before me. I'm looking at S36 right now. So it looks like red 1, COR 1. It looks like blue and then green have a little bit less territory. So, okay, yeah, blue's like kind of second as far as faction power goes. But, I mean, that's just for city activity. It doesn't help. My leader's very aggressive in PvP. Yeah, that can be challenging. So, let me look at the boards real quick. Just for anyone who's curious, if they want to follow along, I will provide some screenshots here. I'm going to post those in the voice chat. Because if this is something that you may run into or you're just curious on, you know, what I might say about this or something, let's do this. Okay, so let me post that there. Let me look at, so that's how server 35 looks right now. Let's look at the rankings. Okay, so rankings are not, rankings are okay. Let's see here. So let's look at rankings just to keep it simple so I'm not posting a lot of screenshots. Let's just do this. So, okay, so you're saying it's one-sided and people are complaining. Let me see here. It doesn't help that your leader's aggressive. Yeah, it doesn't. Like, we just finished COR and he went full-on murder to hold the RSS tile just for his... Oh, I see. Okay. And can I ask, is that the WH or the Wild Hearts Alliance, Forge? It is? Okay. So what I would say is, let's see here. Okay, let me ask you this: do you have? I'm sorry if you already answered this. Is there a? Do you guys have currently a Kingdom Discord? Is there a Kingdom Discord set up for S35? Not anymore. Okay. So essentially, the way that you guys are communicating with one another is, for the most part, in game, as far as with like other alliance leads or officers. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. DMs, but private messages. Is it in game, or do you guys have anything on Discord, or is the majority of that communication happening in game? I guess that's where I'm trying to get to first. But it's 50. Okay, it's 50-50. Gotcha. Okay, so some Discord, some in game. Uh, okay, let me ask this right now: how many of the top alliances? Let's just say down to let's just say 10. How many of the alliances in the top 10, maybe the top 15? Or I guess better yet, I mean, do you guys have like? I mean, is there anything as far as because typically you can't do anything in game, right? You can't really set up a group, right? You said I'm in contact with the top 4 at most. Okay. So that kind of gives me the answer I was looking for. I mean, I would say based on how the leaderboards look right now, I mean, it's still okay. It really hasn't gotten away, I think, from anyone too much yet. You're at 99 out of 100, 100 out of 100. Okay, so you guys have hit level 5. 100 out of 100. Okay, so activity is still good within the top 5. You guys have, I mean, again, without knowing how many inactives as far as present or silent status players they have, most of your alliances in the top 5 are near 100% capacity. Even going all the way down to number 10. Number 9, 94 out of 100. Number 10, 82. Okay, so you start seeing a little bit of drop off at number 10. But that also could just be because maybe they just hit alliance level 5 and increased their cap. So that could play a factor in as well. And they just haven't had a chance to recruit as much. So what I would say is, I mean, at this point, you really only have a few options. I think, as always, the most important thing is to try and, get everyone on the same page. And or even if not everyone, it could just be the majority, right? If your alliance, and this is why I say it's kind of iffy, because your alliance leader, for the most part, is going to be the one that, more or less kind of dictates the direction that your alliance is going in. Because you really have a couple different ways that an alliance leader can position themselves. Either A, they're the maniacal overlord, and they're just going to do things their way, no matter what feedback you give them, whether it's officers or members. Then you're going to have the other side of an alliance lead, and that sounds bad. But then you're going to have the other side of an alliance leader where your alliance leader, enjoys listening to feedback and takes in constructive criticism from officers and from many players, and they factor that in to their decisions, right? I'm a little more in favor of the latter, because that's just how I like to do things as well for my group. Right, but that's just within your alliance. Then you have to look at how does your alliance lead interact with leads outside of his own alliance, right, or other alliances, and right, are they willing to talk, right? I think the thing is you have to figure out what your leader's goals are. Does your lead want to work with other alliances and try and build a strong server for these upcoming features like SVS and other things in AVA, or do they only care about being number one, right? Are they just in that server to be the number one alliance? They don't really care about anything else. Right, I think that's kind of the first part to figure out, is where does your alliance leader fall under for what they want out of the server. Then, based on that, you can then figure out, because keep in mind, even if an alliance just wants to be the number one alliance, that doesn't mean that they are devoid of wanting to conversate or communicate with other alliance leads, right? Them wanting to be the number one alliance does not mean that will impede server goals or policies. Right, that's just a personal goal that they have for themselves, or that lead has for himself as being a leader of an alliance. But that's the big thing you have to try and get. You said, I feel right now he wants number one. He's very power high. Okay, yeah. I don't know how much fighting is going on. Let me look at the honor boards. Okay, wow. Yeah, you guys are pretty high in honor, so you guys have definitely. I mean, but that also could just be because COR just finished, so the numbers could be a little inflated as well. But based on the boards and you having a good amount of people that are close to like 100 to a mil higher. Oh, really? Wow. So he's just okay. In that case, I mean, yeah, man. If you're who's the lead? Is it this Forge person? Osiris Karma. Okay. Yeah, I mean, like I think their troop power is pretty good for where they're at. I think the good thing is you have, let me see, is it really, it's not super condensed. You have ND, which is Nomad Community. Their troop power is pretty close, but I mean, for the most part, they might only be able to really challenge. Yeah, the challenge is, once you start kind of hoarding and condensing a lot of the top troop power players, at that point it then becomes, right, do those players believe in what the leader's goal is, or do they not? And then at that point, what I would say is, in your position, I think a lot of it is, reaching out to the top alliances. I would say try to reach out to the top 10, top 15 or so. Maybe even if you just set up like a temporary Discord server to try and get them in, ask if they have Discord, see, see what their line of thinking is, right? What do they want out of the server? Or maybe you present something and you ask, hey, is anyone on board with this, or do they think something else? So you did do some of those things. Okay. In that case, and if it just fell flat, and you felt like you guys put forward a really good effort to bring alliance leads together and to try and come up with policies. Now, keep in mind, right, that isn't just players or leaders suggesting them. Sometimes that can be you guys suggesting policies. But typically, if every alliance is kind of for themselves, which I think is what you're getting at here, or that's happening in S35, and you guys try to band people together, and it's just kind of become they do whatever they want, then yeah, at that point, I would say if you've exhausted all the options that you think would be applicable, then yeah, at that point I would probably consider migrating. I would probably consider, just biding your time, doing what you can to stay low, and letting players know that if they want to migrate out, they, would have to spend like $5 to buy a space teleport, maybe more depending on their power. Otherwise, they would have to wait till the alliance gets to level 9, which is probably going to take 5 to 6 months, give or take, just depending on how many extra donations you have going in. That's my assumption based on the most recent update. I personally feel like it might take that long, but I would probably average it like somewhere between 4 to 6 months. Is about how long it might take. And that's really from like more of like a free-to-play alliance. If you have spenders that are in your alliance and they're over donating to get your alliance tech level faster, then yeah. Yeah, so you're at... Oh, Reamer, is that exactly 3 months? Or is that exactly 90 days? Or is that like 95 days? Like, because you're in S16. And let me see how old S16 is. You have that now. Let me see how old S16 is. That'll give me a window. Where's S16? Here we go. You are... Okay, S16 is 89 days. So you're just under 3 months. But the other question I would ask, Reamer, is that the number one alliance? Because I don't know if CG... You are. Okay. So if you're the number one alliance, I would imagine you probably have a good amount of spenders, and probably more spenders than the other alliances do. So even though the example you're giving is still a good timeline, it's not indicative of the average alliance that has a lower number of spenders or more of a free-to-play base. But I think even on the track you're at now, right, you're probably going to be at 7 mil, maybe around day 91, 92. So that means that just to get to 7 mil points or donation points, it took 3 months, right? So then what you... And keep in mind, it's going to go faster because as you get to higher levels, you're going to have more... you're going to have more player capacity, so you're going to have more overall donations. So yeah, the pace that it took you to get to this within 3 months is going to be faster for when you hit 13. But I would still estimate you're probably still looking at 4 to 5 months, arguably, for CG to probably hit level 9. At least based on what I would estimate off here. But for World Hearts, okay, so you're in WH, got you. So if you're a player that doesn't necessarily want to be a part of, and this is just for anyone, right? Not just for Forge's example, but if you're a player that just doesn't want to be a part of that server because of kind of how things are playing out, and you're getting those indications, then yeah, you'll have to wait to hit Alliance level 9, so then you can start purchasing space teleports in your Alliance shop. So that means that you might be there for 4 to 6 months, right? Depending on the activity level of your alliance. Because if you're in a lower ranked alliance and you don't have any activity, I mean, you could probably kiss that dream goodbye. You might have to be there for a year. So it's probably more beneficial for you to spend the money to get the space teleports to migrate out, or you just make a new account, right? But those are like the realistic options that you probably have at this point based on what you're saying, Forge. And again, I feel like that just is applied to any player that is in a situation like that. So, again, that's my recommendation for what I would say. And then, I'm sorry, I think someone else had another question. Oh, sorry, Cookie said, would I mind taking a look at S38? Sure. I mean, I don't know if I have an S38 account. I might. I think I'm close to. Let's see, S38. Oh, I do. Okay, cool. Let me load an S38 and take a look. Okay, man, you know what's so wild? Every server I go back and take a look at that I have a level of an account in has all been attacked. And most of them are in alliances, which is intense. Because it means that players are... No, again, well, I shouldn't say that because that might give the wrong overall impression. I mean, you know, any players can go out and attack someone, so it's not necessarily... indicative. Let me take a look at the map here for S38. So S38 is where you guys at? Have you guys capped capital cities yet? Oh, well, capitals might not have opened yet. So, okay. So it's, I mean, color-wise, it's, you know, the grid is nice and kind of pretty balanced. What did I want to look at? Well, that's faction power. Faction power is okay. So red and blue are pretty close. Green's about half a red. Art of War is number 1. Okay. Sorry, I don't know if anyone had a hand raise either. Okay, no hand raises. I got to keep checking back for the hand raises. Sorry, so S38. I mean, yeah, I would say it's... let me see here. Okay, I would say it's okay. I mean, the power gap from 1 to 5 is 7.5 mil. I would say that's a little high. I think if you look at ranks 5 through 12, the gap there is pretty good. It's only about 2 mil, 2.5. So I think your middle section of alliances has really good activity and still power distribution. There, I think the top 5 of alliances, because really it starts getting away from you at number 4. Where it's 17. And just for anyone that wants to follow along, I'm sorry, I will provide a screenshot as well. The other week it was 10 mil? Yeah, man. Oh, jeez. Yeah, I can only imagine. So I think the power gap is I don't think it's bad. I mean, as far as if you're asking on how you can work on that, so, you know, in S36, you know, we work on this actively. Like, it's essentially a daily thing. Right, and some of the tips I would give is, you know, put a limit on the number 1 alliance for what, and let me point this out, which is that, right, working on balancing out the power gap can really, I shouldn't say only be done. What I will say is it has an extreme higher chance of being done if you have a large amount of alliances that have joined that server together with similar ideals in mind. If you're joining a server and it's just a group of individual alliances all to themselves, and they don't have any connection, then that is going to be extremely difficult because you're going to have to convince each individual alliance leader to get on board and do these things or sell them on it. That's a lot harder to do than if you've already prepped a group beforehand and like interviewed people for a leadership position and let them know like as an example, in my jumper group, right, we had interview applications. So I had a leadership application that had like 15 or 16 questions on it. In addition to that, after I vetted applications that were sent, I then picked players that I wanted to do an interview with. So then I interviewed people on over a voice call, and I spent probably about 30 to 45 minutes with each candidate that I interviewed. And then after that, I filtered the list out a little bit more. And during that interview, I talked about all of these things that we would do. I talked about balancing the power, about what our policies and our ideals were. So all of the leads that are in S36 already know what some of our long-term goals are and what some of our policies are that they liked, they agreed with. So that's why I think it's easier to do it when you have that level of infrastructure already set up before going into a server. Otherwise, it's just more difficult. It doesn't mean it can't be done, but it is more difficult because, like I said, you have to reach out to each individual alliance leader, and you have to get everyone together in, a Discord group chat, or you have to get them into a Discord server together, and then you have to talk about those things, and you have to set up those policies. But what I would say is that if you have a group that's already kind of set up, then some ways that you can do that is you put a limit on who on the number one alliance. So you say, for example, if you're the current number one alliance and you remove an inactive player, you can only bring in a player that's like 25 or 50k power or less. What that will do is it will eventually cause a ripple effect where the number one alliance will eventually come down to the number two alliance in power, or the number two alliance will catch up to the number one alliance. And then whoever becomes the new number one will just apply that same policy. So that's how we do it in S36. Whoever is the current number one alliance applies that policy to their recruiting. So anyone who's the current number one can only recruit a player that's like 35k power or lower. And we'll probably up that to 50k power at some point. But then what we do is that for any players that are looking to join a alliance, we try to funnel them into the lowest ranked family alliance, right? We have, I think, 7 alliances now within the family. And then we also help send players, and we do mergers for players that are in other families, that even if they're not a part of our family coming in. So, right, those are things that we proactively work on. The other part is that you work on mergers. So you'll look at, as an example, if I'm looking at the S36 rankings, I might go down, I might like click on the blue column, and I might look at an alliance that is maybe below 10 mil, right? So that kind of starts at 7 if I'm looking at S38 rankings for alliance power. I might look at alliances that are under 10 mil and reach out to them, their leaders, and say, hi, I wanted to see if you might be interested in possibly doing a merger to get your active players into a more active alliance, so that way they get access to more cities, higher resource levels, possibly some purchases from people spending, right? The general benefits that you would get. And then what you do is you ask them how many hyper and active players do you have in your alliance, and then you go off of that. Oh, I dropped out. Am I still here? Uh-oh. It says my voice connection's good. Can anyone still... Oh, I'm back now. Okay, cool. Where did I cut off at? Well, was it just a second? Or where did I cut off at so I know? Oh, okay. Cookie's like, I heard you the entire time. All right, Embla. That just means get a better connection, Grill. No, I'm just joking. I love you so much. What I will say is, right, these are some things that you can do to work on the power balance. So, again, keep in mind that in the beginning, right, as you're increasing your power capacity from big family in your alliance techs, you're going to be recruiting players internally. As you remove inactive players, if you keep track of them, then you're going to bring in players that are already in your faction. Once that well of players starts drying up, which is probably going to be by the time you hit alliance level 5 or 6, give or take, then you're going to want to start working on mergers with the lower active alliances that still have activity, right? It's the diehard players that for whatever reason are just sticking with that alliance because they just don't know that there's other options. So you reach out to that alliance, and then what you do is you ask them, hey, you ask them, are you interested in a merge? You give them the reasons why it would benefit them, and then you ask them how many hyper and how many active players they have. I've already worked on probably about 4 mergers that I've helped out in S36 outside of my own alliance. I helped out Embla with Emerge. She's the lead there in S36. She's awesome like a possum. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And then, gosh, who else was it? I'm working on Emerge right now for FS, which is another alliance. And then also with previously OSY, I worked on, and then I worked on Emerge with them. I worked on Emerge with, gosh, I can't remember who the other alliance was. But there was another alliance I worked on. So again, right, it's good if you can kind of have a single point of contact or someone who just goes out and does that work for you. I'm somewhat of a kind of a jack of all trades, if you will, without necessarily kind of tooting my horn in that kind of a way. But I just like doing those things, right? So I like doing those kind of management-like areas. And I find that that's a big part of the enjoyment I get out of Infinity Kingdom and these kinds of kingdom builder games. Like, I love doing that kind of management type work, trying just to be a good support asset for all the alliances that are in the server. My mindset on how I approach supporting a server is not just for my alliance, it's for everyone, right? And that even includes alliances that are outside of our family's group of alliances. I think all of that is really how you build a great, healthy server, right? It's about how are you going to benefit and support everyone, not just your own alliance, right? So a lot of my thought process is kingdom-wide goals and perspectives instead of alliance goals and perspectives. Even though I do still factor those in, I'm always thinking about the bigger picture, right? I'm always thinking about the little guy or the free-to-play base, and how are we gonna come out with things that are going to be fair for everyone and balanced for everyone. That doesn't put one alliance above the other. I think we have a great group, like I said, of leads. But anyways, I'm not sitting here trying to promote or toot my horn for my server, but just giving it a direct example. So yeah, I think those are things you can do in your server if you're trying to work on the power balance. And I apologize if that was like a really long way of wording it. Sometimes I dive too far in to things on what I'm talking about. In the meantime, I've neglected upgrading buildings. So let me do that real quick, if no one minds me. Sweet. Let's go to Castle 26. Boss, we appreciate you for that. I mean, like I said, it's a lot. If you haven't played Kingdom Builders before, especially for ones that have these types of features in them, right? Whether it's an AVA, an SVS type thing, or anything else that's kind of end game beyond you doing everything in your current server or kingdom, then it can maybe be a lot to take in. But if you're someone who has experienced it before, then the things I'm talking about may be familiar, and they may be not. It's just the thing I always try and explain to new players is that there's a lot of different ways that kingdoms can be managed and ran. Not every kingdom is going to be managed and ran the same way, and that's why it's good to sometimes try and expand your perspective on what you think is the norm, because, as I've said before, far more often than not, players who just start out playing and typically stay in their starting kingdom, or whichever kingdom they decide to make their home, are limited on their perspective of how many different ways or different types of kingdoms are managed or ran. Or even the fact that, like, let's say you get lucky. As an example, let's say you get lucky and you landed in S8 when I was there, or even in S36, and you noticed like the lack of fighting or like the lack of PvP during kill event, like server-wide stuff, right? All of those things that you may not have realized were happening were all done at a management level, right? They were all done amongst the top group of alliances coming to an agreement and then sending out alliance mails to put those things in place, and then also setting up teams of people that would go out and stop players from bullying other small groups or hives, right? So I'm sure for any players that are in alliances, you may not know that the reason why a server is why certain things are being done in a server, and maybe why you've had the luxury of enjoying things in a server, is all because of things that have been done at that management level that some people just may not know of if you've never really thought of it, or you've never looked into it a little bit more, I should say. And yeah, I mean, this is probably like a conversation for another time because I could make a whole series out of like kingdom management and like how it affects almost every part of a player's experience. Um, so sorry, let me see if anyone has any questions. I don't know if anyone had a hand raise here. No? Gosh, I feel like I'm just doing a psychology seminar at this point. Let me see. I dropped out. Let me see here. Rematch is like, this is why I should be R5. I'm so good at recruiting. There you go, man. Nice. Um, Rematch said, actually kind of crazy. I just found this game on the App Store, joined the first server, which was S36, and didn't even know about any of the Jet project. Yeah, I mean, I think that is lends wonders to how a server can play out and go, as far as for what some people may know or may not know, right, about how they do play out. But yeah, man, it's fascinating. There's really a lot more to Kingdom Builders than I think most people give the genre credit for. And at least for me, I personally just think it's the most fulfilling genre to play games in my opinion, because there's just no other game. I mean, maybe something like a WoW type game, right? But that's a completely different genre than what Infinity Kingdom is. And I mean, like I said, I think Infinity Kingdom just has so much potential right now for the direction the game is going into within the mobile gaming Kingdom Builder genre space. This is the first Kingdom Builder I've played that I've cared so much about, not only just to put content out, but also to do things like this. Even in all the other Kingdom Builders I've played, I've never seen them support creators or content individuals where they promote things on the Discord for doing educational series like this, or for doing like expert-led workshops. Right. I mean, I would love to do a series that just talks about PvP and mechanics, right? And I bet you a lot of people would tune into that. Right. I would love to do a series on like immortal composition building, because I bet you a lot of people would tune into that. I'm sorry. I think Frey had a question. Let me invite Frey real quick. Frey, what's up? You are on and live. Welcome back to the show, or to the podium, I should say.
So I do have a question, and I think it's something that maybe a lot of servers who do go down the more management kind of kingdom-wide, server-wide kind of management route will face, and that is a lot of our players. So I'm from server 19, and we have pretty Farmville type rules is what people call it, right? Is what the haters call it, and basically a lot of people are quite worried about that, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't have my own doubts crop up as a result. And basically people saying that, the moment we go up against a server that's used to warring, we're going to get wiped, or just people. And the thing is, then like you said, there are always going to be those troublemakers, right? And we've been able to suppress most troublemakers, but what's happening now is their big thing now is, we need to take down the server. We need to start some wars because for the good of the server, right? And because of that, they're starting to rally more and more people, and the people that aren't being rallied are getting a bit worried. And we are growing quite fast, but it's kind of like, is like the Farmville, the kind of farming getting up as far as we can, what is there a downside to it? Are we doing it right? Basically, I'm asking for your guidance. Is our server doomed is what I'm asking.
Oh, okay. So, I'll be honest. I think so. The answer I'm going to give you is going to be a little deeper than, than someone might be ready to hear, and not ready as in. Well, let me just start, because it'll probably be easier for me to give you the answer, anyways. So let me give you the short version. Oh God, did I do that right? Oopsies. I don't think I did that right. I need to figure out how to drop someone. I bet you I just missed it on dropping someone from the thing, because I think I might have just disconnected Fram. Oh, I did. Yeah, I'll figure it out. I'm gonna figure that out. How to drop someone from the other speaker thing. But anyways, let me answer the question. So, how do you avoid running into what some people may call Farmville? So first off, I think the important piece to understand is that a lot of what has to happen has to be done on on an educational level, first and foremost. Let me see. minutes. Okay, sorry, I just had to send something real quick. So, what I mean by that is, if you really want to get your your server on board, it really starts with one, getting your leads on board, right? It's always a trickle effect, right? You have to start at the top and work your way down. So you would want to, as an example, you would want to reach out to your leads and explain, because keep it like I've talked about before. End game is server versus server, right? That's like, we know what's coming out. It's just a matter of when. And the servers who start preparing for it earlier rather than later are going to be, in my opinion, I think, better situations. Now, the PvP question you mentioned is, like I talked about earlier in the show, it's a little more give and take. It's not, in my opinion, as impactful, because I think the servers, like, you have to look at it like this. If we go into SVS and I have 500 players, or even 300 players, let's just say, just to keep it more conservative on the ratio. Let's say I have 500 players that are going into SVS, or sorry, 300 players that are going into SVS from my server, and your server has 100 people that are going into SVS. Now let's say all your server has done is fight, right, which in retrospect has stalled their progression by a decent amount. And then let's say that my server that has 300 players has had little to no PvP, but our average player's level and true power is higher than the server that has done nothing but PvP all day long, or has PvP'd all day, since the beginning of time. What that means is that my server at 300 players is going to have 3 times the amount of action points, more or less, available to them to actually go out and fight. In addition to that, it also means that my player base, on average, is going to be able to fight almost, I would say, at equal to or more than the server that has 100 players based on their average power level. So not only will my server have more activity, therefore more overall resources available to them, they'll be able to cover more of the map, they'll be able to cover more time zones, which means that they're going to have more average activity throughout a 24-hour period. And just from that, you hope that you might be able to organize 300 players more if you're able to still keep that activity, maybe, rather than depending on how the group is. Because typically, if you're in a server that fights, you're probably not going to be as organized as a server that doesn't fight, because the reason you're fighting is because you probably don't get along. So it's like, you're kind of, I don't mean to, chuckle in that way, but all of these things are very standard, typical things that are going to happen from a server that fights. Like, I can tell you in S5, those alliances more or less don't like each other. Like, that's one of the reasons why they fight. They just PvP all day long. So, if you were to tell me, if we were to bet money, and that money was going to be on whether or not we think, would Server 5, and this is just an example, would Server 5 come together for SVS and fight as a server, or would they just fight and do whatever they wanted to, each alliance for themselves? My money would be on they would just do whatever they want to do for themselves, right? I don't think there's going to be any level of organization or structure from that kind of a server, and there's other servers that are like that. So that's something I think important to take away as well. In addition, if your server is organized and you have any level of structure early on, you are going to be more appealing for recruits. So, like, let's say you want to get new activity or new fresh blood coming in, that's going to be done through migration. The majority of players will not go to, and I'm going to say this clear, they are not going to go to a PvP war server, right? That's one of the reasons why S5 is still in the position they're in, because all they do is fight. And that only appeals to a minority base. The majority of players will go to a server that is healthy, doesn't have server-wide PvP, which means they're not in a state of civil war. That's one of the reasons why so many players went to S8 even after I left, right? There was like, I don't even know, 100 players that went there or something from an alliance that reached out to me about wanting to bring over their players, and they still went over there even after I left. So, but they went there because of the appeal of what S8 was building. And I think they more or less, again, I don't know what they're doing now, but I'm only speaking for why that group wanted to go there. The same thing is going to happen for the server I'm in right now, right? There's a lot of players that have reached out, and I'm sure other servers are experiencing that as well. But it all starts with how you promote your server early on to the public view, and is your server able to stay along that path? Because it is the most appealing path to players. Right now, it doesn't really matter if you have a 1. I don't think there's too much weight put in to whether you have a 1, 2, or 3 faction based server. But I do, even though I do think it factors in a little bit, but I think the heaviest factor is coming in from the state of, is your server doing server-wide PvP? Do you do server-wide free-for-alls? Because that's just not appealing to the majority of players. Players don't want to get attacked at any time, anywhere, no matter what. Right? People just don't want to play in servers like that. Now, it doesn't matter if you limit it and you just do it to kill event or contention lords, or worse, if it's just a free-for-all anytime, anywhere. So, again, I think all of those factor into that. But I would say, I would say at this point, with where your server's at, I mean, it's going to be hard to... At least I would say it might be more challenging than you would think to try to recover. So again, that would be my, advice there. So if that answers it, I know I said a lot. So if I need to re-clarify in something more specific, I'm happy to. Because when the passion juices start flowing, it gets away from me. So yeah, let me read here. Reamer's like, yes, mechanics. Yeah, man, mechanics are important. Oh, sorry, I'm just reading right now a little bit more. He's like, I need to get one of those space teleporters. Nisha, no more players hoarding 10 million T5s. Hey, that is the darnest truth. And for anyone who gets that, you probably know what game we've played. But yeah, I mean, and honestly, that was probably one of the other things I should have mentioned in the beginning when I was talking about things I really like about Infinity Kingdom, is there's a limit on how many troops you can have. I can't tell you how much I think that's a ginormous win for the game and for the overall base. In so many ways, it is. So. Ooh. Oh, sorry though. But I know you specifically were asking like how to avoid Farmville. So I think my passion bubble ran away from me. So let me dial it back in. So how to avoid the Farmville? Like I said, you have to reach out to every player. You have to get the leads on board with what you're doing, and that's where it has to start. Right? You have to sell them on why they need to be. And I know basically what I just went on my rant is kind of talking about what those selling points are. But you have to sell the leaders on that. If you can't sell the leaders on it, they're not gonna send alliance mails out. They're not gonna want to reinforce it. They're not gonna want to set policies up. They're not gonna take action against players who go against things. So it all starts there. You have to get the top group of alliances. And when I say top group, I mean, ideally top 10, top 20 is what I would start with. I'd go as deep as you can, but maybe kind of starting there around the top 20 range. And you have to get people on board. People have to realize that everyone farms, right? I love when people tell me I don't farm. Well, if that's the case, why do I see your troops out there gathering resources? Why do I see you leveling up your buildings, right? Because all you're doing is farming your resource buildings, right? So everything is really an aspect of farming. Like these Kingdom Builders are a farming game by default, right? They just have PvP elements in the game that make them fun, right? Or add another fun element. But I love when people tell me that. They're like, oh, I don't want to be in this farming kingdom. Well, my farming kingdom is going to be more prepared for SVS, so when we see you, we'll make sure that we're zeroing you 24/7 like 7-Eleven, and then we'll talk about how much more awesome our farming kingdom is than your PvP-ridden kingdom. So, and again, I think a lot of it is, again, don't get me wrong, the majority are not saying that. It's really the minority, right? It's the smaller group of players that are really pushing that, that they don't want to farm it. But what they don't realize is that players that are able, like, it's easy to educate people. It is easy to tell people, to give people information on good PvP mechanics, right? And teach people how to be good at PvP and showing them what to do. You can do that in a video. You can do that via alliance mails. That part is not difficult, right? What is difficult is selling them on why they would need to do it this way. Because keep in mind, most players in a server do not know that SVS was announced. Most people don't even know that SVS is going to be a thing. Most people don't even know what SVS is or why they should care about it. So you have to sell them on that first, right? And that's really why I talk about how educating your player base is vitally important, right? You have to go out there and get your group of alliances on board, have synchronized alliance mails. And then more importantly, when you get access to server mail after COR round 1, that's when you take it to the next step. And hopefully, if and when they improve the server mail receiving end for how it looks, it'll be even better. But those are things you can take advantage of now, utilizing your server mail. But like I said, the leads have to be on board, right? Thankfully, in S36, we messaged leaders day 1 of the server. We messaged the top 50. No, sorry. We messaged the top 25, top 30 leaders day 1. Day 2, we messaged the top 100 alliances. And essentially, it was just an introduction for our group. We invited them onto the Discord so they could get tagged. And now we have like 35 of the top 40, 50 alliances in our server, right? And we were able to organize and set up an infrastructure basically on day 2, day 3. And I think that's what's really benefiting our server a lot, and any other servers that are doing that as well. It just helps. So he's like, preach. Yes, sorry. Yeah, and that's the other thing, like Reamer said too. I think the good thing is that the game has soft measures in place to prevent you from being zeroed. Right? I think prosperity is such a genius level idea where it not only does it factor when you get popped, but it also limits how many hits you can take, meaning it limits how much RSS is taken, how many deads you'll take, and then it random teleports you. I think that is one of the most genius level ideas and features that's in Infinity Kingdom that I think really separates it from others in the genre, is how you could still punish someone, but you have to put work in. Right? If you port someone out, you have to then go and look for them, and then you have to find them. Right? It's like you're playing a repetitive game of Where's Waldo, right? But you can still factor, right? You could still damage someone, but you have to grind. I like that. I like how you have to work in some areas to really get a result that you want. And I think for me, that's something I love about IK. That gives my credit card PTSD. Yeah, man. Oh, yeah. Yeah, LM is interesting. Very different than IK. So. So Forge asks... I'm sorry, I'm just seeing your question now. Because I think I have about 5 more minutes here. Sorry, let me see here. I'm just seeing to see if anyone asked another question, because you guys got me for about 5 or 6 more minutes. Just because I gotta go meet the Madre for lunch. And I gotta come back and do some more content stuff. So. And plus, I have totally been neglecting my accounts today. Let me see here. So, sorry, Forge says, but what if you go up, what if 300 go up against 100 whales? First off, I haven't seen 100 whales in any server, especially ones that have stayed long enough to play. So, I mean, even though I understand that you're just using that as an example, I just don't think that's something that we've seen yet. I think if the people in S11 would have stayed, probably could have seen something like that. But a lot of them stopped playing already. You're amazed this session's still going. Ah, gosh. I know, right? I have to keep water near me at all times, and throat lozenges along with warm tea, lemon, and honey. That's the trick. We've been going... Oh, wow. We're actually almost at about 3 hours. Dang! I didn't realize we're almost at 3 hours. Wow. Okay. Well, good thing I put about a 5-minute limit on it. Let me see. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I think to Reamer's point on sometimes whales can be a little unreachable. Sometimes it's about switching up your tactics, right? Instead of trying to fight whales head on, it's really about how are you mitigating and limiting what they can do. This is something we've done a great job of in S36, and you still have a lot of tools available to you. There's a lot of ways to limit and apply pressure, even if it's just a couple whales, right, or one or a few, right? There are still things you can do for it. The challenge is really if you have, like an alliance full of spenders, kind of like how And now keep in mind that is not the norm, right? That's like the in between. That's the far or not too often situations that occur. The old alliance, yeah. Raymer's like, yeah, 3 hours. That's how we do things, yeah. But yo, just so you guys know, man, next week's session is probably going to be bigger and better, right? Because that's when we start getting into, like, the next week preview, I'll tell you, is going to be like early game. So we're going to talk about early game. It's going to be essentially a whole session about, like, the first month of when you're in a server, right? We'll talk about, like, best practices, things you should be doing for your player account. We'll really dive into like some of the big events. We'll talk more in depth with things like City Siege, Supreme Alliance, other things, and we'll give you guys good perspectives on. So that's going to be an awesome show. But even more than that, there's gonna be more people in that week than most likely the amount we had in this week. Again, keep in mind because we didn't get the promotion or the follow-up tag promotion for this week, but we will be getting that hopefully in the consecutive weeks. So something just to look forward to. Leo. So yeah, if you're wondering on jumping, I touched a little bit on it, and that's going to be in the recording too as well when I upload. And I'll have those time stamped too as well. You're like I would as well. I'd like to see the hypothetical scenario. Okay. Yeah, man. I mean, I think it could be cool. I mean, I really hope that it isn't just going to be 1v1. You know, like I really hope it's not going to be one alliance. You know, one alliance is full of players versus another alliance. Like, or sorry, it's not going to be one server versus one server. Not that I think that'd be bad. It's just I would really like to see at least a minimum of 4 to 8 servers in the SVS map if that's how they do it. I really think that's a good window as kind of a first season test to see how things go. And also because the more servers that are in SVS, it just gives you an opportunity to do a lot more diplomacy, which I just love doing. I think is always a great part. Gina realized like how to avoid Farmville. You must get everyone involved. Yep, that's the short version of it. Yeah. PvP. If without grievances. Yeah. Sorry, Forge asked, what's your thoughts on the rally system? I mean, I think the rally system is okay. I just think that they need to add. I think they either need to add another feature to the rally system. So I think the current rally system is kind of more like a machine gun style. I think they need to add in like the typical shotgun style for the rally system, which is what I think a lot of players are used to in other games, where you stack the rally leader. So I think one way it could work is you allow the troops, so you allow like the total troop power to increase for the rally lead, and then the different tiers factor in that way. And then you can make it like if you really want to keep it simple, just make it where the troops get added stack onto the stack and add accumulatively to the rally leader's troops, and then from there you can make it to like the rally. You can have it be like where the rally leader's immortal skills will be the ones that factor, because with the current system it might be difficult. It might be difficult to do it like in other games where you would also have the people who are joining the rally have their immortal skills proc as well or activate. I think something that is a little bit more of a good compromise and ideal, at least to start out, would be just to add on or change. I think adding on would be nice because I do like I do like the machine gun mechanic of the current rally system because you can use it in certain ways. But I think they need to add at minimum, if not just change the system. But I think adding would be nice to see and have it just be where they front load the troop power for the rally lead. I think that would be good. The other challenge is are they going to do it where you can only load it with the same similar troop tier, or can anyone join a rally? And then they'll just give each different tier, like if it's T1, 2, 3, 4, 5 troops, right, a different power factor in that rally system, right? So you have to think about that too as well and how that converts over. But I think for the most part, right, or you can just have it be where like, you know, the highest tier troops has a certain power allotted to it, however you do it. But yeah, they need to make it to where the rally lead's troop load can eventually be, you know, I don't even know, 3, 4, 5, 600K, and it just loads that, so that way you can hit bigger players. Like the idea of the rally system, I like, and I think most people again are used to, is to be able to hit whales or hit big players. So free to play has at least a resource against them. And obviously it would do more damage. It means that you would probably take more dead. So I mean, again, there are good reasons on why you would use a system like that. But yeah, I do think the rally system needs either an addition or an adjustment. Right, but again, more so an addition, because as I was saying, I do like the way the current system is set up. I just think they need to add another element to it, which would be cool. You could set a rally and choose what kind of a rally you want to run. That's awesome. I like the ability of customizing the rallies a little bit more, because that's something I haven't seen in other games. So, like I said, I think IK has a lot of potential to work on, and some good building blocks. Reamer said, maybe points you get more COR rewards. Yeah, it's easy to shrink a faction if needed to grow. Razmataz says, Boss Nasty, thank you for doing this. Looking forward for more of these things to come. Thanks. Appreciate the feedback. Yeah, you guys got me for, I'm going to say another minute. Another minute or two. I just want to try to catch up on chat. Yeah. Leo, yeah, and if you're interested on jumping, I mean, I have a video out on it on my channel that kind of breaks down jumping as well. I mean, a few people do. So... Gotcha. I need to stay. I need to do live sessions for 24 hours. There we go. Yeah. Maybe if I did like a YouTube or a Twitch stream. Sure. Yeah, right. All right, guys. Look, I'm gonna go ahead and just call it now because, like I said, I do have to get somewhere. But, again, Frey said thanks for the stream, boss. Hey, man, no, you guys are more than welcome. 24-hour education endurance stream. Yeah, that's probably what I should name it. But, again, for everyone that tuned in, keep in mind we're going to do this next week, Tuesday, the same time. Again, I imagine we're going to have more people for that show than we did for this one. Like I said, I think we peaked at about 65, 66 people that I saw. So I thought for, again, me just joining, some people knowing it, I thought it was great, a really good turnout that we had. I really appreciate the engagement from everyone, whether it was in the voice channel chat, a lot more texting engagement than I was thinking of, which was, again, awesome to see and to hear with all of you. And again, for those, again, special shout out to Frey for utilizing the mic time. So winky face over to you, thanks. But again, great turnout. I really hope, if anything, that a lot of you guys just took away anything good, right, out of the kind of 7 or 8 topics that I touched on, along with any questions I answered. I think for me, that's always my hope. I think doing these kinds of sessions on the official game Discord is always great to do. I think it's a great way to educate players. It's a great way to inform players, give people different perspectives, engagement, and I think interaction with other players that play in other servers, I think, is a great thing to do. So hopefully we can keep building on it, and I definitely think this first week was a good showing, and definitely a success. So I'll be looking forward to seeing you guys all back next week for anyone that's able to join. And until next time, I'll catch everyone later. Everyone, hopefully, I hope you guys have a good day, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you're at. Take care.